being with Virginia Roberts was something about him not sweating, and that he was with his kids that day, so he couldn't have possibly been with Virginia. And it really wasn't. Some of the answers that he was giving, all they did was make me more suspicious of that. Whatever came, I'm sure you know what interview I'm talking about. Whatever came of that, and how did you feel about
it? Yeah, that was Emily Maitlis, a BBC reporter, interviewed him, and it was surprising that he agreed to an interview. I really do believe that Andrew is one of he must be on the spectrum in some sort of way. I think I'm not saying that as a negative for anybody else on the spectrum. Just for him, he's missing a certain part of his critical thinking ability. He doesn't seem to use logic properly. So he thought, I really do believe he thought that he was going to be able to draw a line under it and trick everybody that he wasn't involved and he wasn't there. But also, what I think he really wanted to do was shout out loud that Virginia Giuffre is lying about a load of stuff and have people to believe him. But the thing is that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, because we've seen Virginia Giuffre's credibility get tackled last week, and that she withdrew a very succinct allegation against someone that she later said she didn't know about. So I think Andrew was desperate to make that manifest himself, and he thought he could do it through the channels of the BBC. That really went nowhere except for him having to pay the money. In the end, he had to pay up to and settle to Virginia, and then it's died down a little bit. And I think that's what that side are desperate for, is for the credibility of the witnesses to start being questioned. And I think that will start to happen a little bit more as more documents come out.
What was the whole thing about him? His
whole he got some sort of something during the Falklands that was some form of shock injury that meant that his sweat glands no longer worked properly, and it's this really rare a rare complaint that people have, that not many people have. And it was clear from the photo evidence that Andrew is one of the sweatiest men around. There's no one sweatier than Andrew. So during that period, this is a problem. If they say these little lies over here and a little lie over here, then they think they can get away with it. It just adds up for people to not believe when they're telling the truth. And I don't say Andrew always lies. He's got to tell the truth every now and again.
So just, to let everybody know again, team is working in the background. Got several tweets up top now. They've been skimming through it. Have some context for the photos. And I don't know if did you already hit on these a little bit, Ryan? Or
no, we haven't dived deep into them yet, Nick. But I will in a second. I just found another set of stuff that I'm trying to pump out really quickly. If you could do me a solid, if you can read through that first tweet that's up there with the emails and everything. That would be a huge help to me while I kind of gather the next batch of tweets out.
Okay, all right, that's what we'll do here. All right, give me one.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, Johnny, if you want to look at those two, so that way you have a little bit of context, I'll read through them.
Yeah. I'm really interested about it now. I'm having a look. I'm looking at the photos at the moment. Some of the photos that got put up. I see the 4 photos there. One's Ransom on the left, Sarah Ransom. Masinko is there as well.
I'm gonna go through them. But who is, just for the audience, who is Sarah Ransom?
Sarah Ransom worked in the sort of network. She's contacted. I tried to open up back channels to Sarah Ransom recently because she's very nervous at the moment. She's one of the ones who became a named complainant, and that puts you in a certain amount of danger. I know all of these girls worked in these areas, but they didn't all do really nefarious things. Some of them were just going around doing the usual regular business that would be around the Epstein house. But Sarah Ransom has got some stories. I would really like to speak to her about a lot of her time. And I think she's going to have to open up to an interview eventually. She's a very interesting lady, though.
And so she seems to be the first one that okay. And so going through the photos there, she is in which one? Okay. So I see they're labeled. So various females on the island in 2006. It's what one of the photos there is labeled. Who or how old would she have been in 2006? Do we know?
I'll check for you right now.
Johnny, did you hear that?
Sorry. I think she would.
Nick, I'll check for you right now.
Yeah, I think she'd be in about early 20s, maybe 2021. I'm not completely sure of her age. But she's there in the picture with the first picture is there with Marcinkova, who's a pilot now. She's changed her name to Marcinko as well, and she's opted out of. I think in the interview she gave to the authorities, she actually said no comment all the way through and refused to talk about it.
She was 22 at the time.
Yeah. Okay. All right, and then some of the other individuals in the photos here. So you have 4 girls in the first one. Do you know if any of them are underage?
No, I don't think. Personally, I don't think any of those are underage at that time, but they may have been when they started. Maybe the girl second on the left may look a little bit younger than the rest, but I think that these girls are 18 plus. I'm really interested in the next picture because it's got Peter Mandelson in Mandy himself, the Lord of Darkness, opposite Epstein. So these are really some juicy pictures.
All right, well, let's go through that.
Well, Mandelson's a really important character in the Labour Party, really. I mean, he's a person who's, if you want to see what Epstein does on intelligence level and through manipulation in the American system, he's the kingmaker. I tried to explain that last time. You know, you look at when Bill Clinton took office, he was there 17 times in the White House, started supporting all the Democratic nominees for vice president, including Gore, who we saw come up last week, and his potential vice president runs of Lieberman and Richardson. And then later on, he's supporting Kerry, giving money to Kerry, of course. We know that he obviously knew Hillary Clinton by the documents last week, and that RFK Jr. who's running. Well, Mandelson is the British version of the kingmaker in Britain. In my opinion, he may be intelligence linked, but everybody knows Mandelson is like Labour Party, the version of the left wing version of the Democrats over in the UK. Well, that's Mandelson's reign. That's where he goes. He's the man behind people like Blair, and he's the one who's really pushing agendas. He got pushed out of the Labour Party maybe about, I would say, 15 years ago. He started. I didn't get pushed out completely. I mean, he's on the periphery, but he got pushed out of the being there, giving interviews on TV and being a public face. People just didn't like him. They started to call him the Lord of Darkness because wherever there was something naughty going on, Mandelson was there. So it's not surprising that he's there with Epstein too. Kingmakers.
It seems like there's a lot of those that have pretty deep ties. We just keep hearing about more and more and more of them. Ian, welcome back to the stage, sir. How are you?
Doing good, man. I didn't know about these new documents until I saw your guys' stream going live, so I'm just pulling them all up now.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of that going on right now, and it's kind of a weird time because we typically expect these things in the evening. So we're planning on doing a space at about 4 p.m. today, 4 p.m. Eastern time, but nothing ever goes to plan, as you guys very well know. Doc, welcome to the stage, man. How are you?
I'm great. Kind of caught back by what I'm seeing. Not necessarily the content, but the fact that this stuff is being released sort of out of the ether at a time when a lot seems to be happening in our country and our world. So I'm very interested to catch up. I'm glad to see Johnny back on the stage. Guy's got a whole book of knowledge, and love listening to him. So happy to comment on any legal questions anybody has.
I actually have a legal question that I would like to put to the panel here that I've been wondering for a couple days now. Is in conspiracy circles, the narrative tends to come up that, oh, they must be releasing these documents now to cover up for something else. And I can't help but feel like that's not really the process here. Like, it feels like the process of when and how these documents are released is a far more complex web of events and influences based on lawyers and court proceedings. Can anyone enlighten us more for the general public what goes into releasing these documents and how the timeline gets determined, and how people should think of that narrative of like, oh, they're trying to cover something up?
Well, I can make an initial comment. To the extent that these documents are coming from the same source that the documents came from last week, that being the court in New York, based on old case files. There's obviously parties who want this information out there and have petitioned the court. That could have happened. The second thing that could have happened is the judge here, understanding the importance of this information, the desire of the public interest to understand what exactly Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell and whoever it is that they're being supported by, whatever intelligence agencies have supported them, that this is information that's in the critical public interest, and she released them on her own. I don't know, because I don't know New York law, procedural law that well, that there was a legal mandate to release these. And I would doubt that would be the case because of the sensitive nature of this case, where there were minors involved. In most cases where minors are abused sexually or otherwise, the courts will usually tend toward not releasing the information, even as it relates to the accused, because frequently that can lead to the minor victims here. But to the extent that Virginia and other victims have come forward and filed legal claims, they really, those women can't really and would not be, I think, heard by the court if they wanted to retract and keep those documents sealed. So I think that's why some of these documents are coming out. Of course, we heard last week that there's at least one party who's petitioned the court. The court set a 30-day hearing to keep their name and their information out of the public disclosure. That being said, with this information coming out and the obvious damage that it's doing to the reputations and the past denials of people like Bill Clinton and I'm blanking on Alan Dershowitz, there's the going to be, I think, the effect on, or could be an effect on other sources of information that relate to these particular crimes, that being the Wiener laptop, which of course contains all the Hillary emails.
Speaking of Hillary, Doc, if I could just jump in, please. This is a juicy one.
I'll land it right there. So that's my general,
No, of course, and we can jump back into it. So I wanted to jump into this one because it's a crazy one. I put it in the nest. So this is an email from Sarah Ransom to, we don't know who. It doesn't state. The top is cut off. It doesn't show it to us. And it says that she was corresponding with the Moscow police to aid them in stopping Hillary or Trump from getting through. Now I'm assuming this has something to do with the elections. And then she says she also emailed her, quote, big little black book to WikiLeaks and Anonymous because my voice will be heard if it's the last thing I do. So I want to get you guys' thoughts on that. The full email is up in the nest. And there's a few other emails. I'm going to start pushing those as well. So I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on that one.
Wow, that's big. Did you just say that was Sarah Ransom?
Yeah, it says Sarah and then Ransom.
Wow,
She mentions her last
name. She's like I say, she's made massive statements through fear, and it was clear that she, out of all the named victims, that Sarah Ransom was the most worried about something happening afterwards or something negative happening to her. So she's actually said things like, I have tapes, I have evidence if anything happens to me, and it'll be released, that sort of like threat. I really, that makes a hell of a lot. I have never heard that she had gone to the Russians with stuff. that is, if that or anything like that, that sounds dangerous. That sounds like she stepped into the world of espionage to save herself in the world of espionage gone wrong, and you just get deeper and deeper. So I'm really sad to hear that. I hope I'm really interested to know more.
Well, let me ask a question. From the headline, she's inferring that Trump was involved in this, but haven't we at least seen through the Russiagate investigations the failure to convict Trump or even touch him?
So this
legally?
isn't Russiagate, Doc, and it's
No,
more of her
but what is it?
proclivities.
What does it mean to keep? I forget how she phrased it. What does it mean for Trump to get through?
Yeah, right. She said to prevent or keep Trump or Hillary from getting through, but I don't know. There's not a lot of context to that.
Yeah, that infers to me, and of course, there's no context, that it's to keep Trump from power. She's equating Trump with Hillary, and obviously she has some issues with Hillary. So this tells me she has some issues with Trump, but this also leads me to believe, at least initially, that she has some credibility issues because Trump's innocence on these matters, of course, hasn't been proven, but neither has any credible evidence of his guilt relating to any of this been offered as well.
You could say that about everybody on this list.
Well, no, because no one has been the subject of the number of prosecutions, indictments, and impeachments that Trump has. No, that's not true at all.
Can anyone clarify for me the email that's in the top here from Sarah Ransom? It has the two. It doesn't have any information about who it's sent to.
No, it doesn't. But there's another email that I found. I'm going to post. It could be to the same person, but another. But so we don't know who this one was sent to directly. We can speculate based off the next one that I'm about to pump out. But we just put out another tweet from our team actually. So it's regarding. It says Clinton paid off girls, used FBI to cover it up, and the quote is this. She was then given substantial payout directly from Clinton Foundation to keep her quiet. She was 1000% certain that the FBI did a cover up, and she was the individuals' names of Hillary's special agent officers involved in intimidating her.
Interesting.
So now we have more Hillary, because I know last week her name came up once and we had people defending her, but it looks like she may have allegedly been involved in some hush money scheme to scare these girls. Nick, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'm looking at these exhibits right now myself, and Johnny, have you ever heard of, and maybe somebody else on the panel has, a Maureen Callahan? I'm doing this all in real time here.
No, I that bell doesn't ring. That name doesn't ring a bell. No.
Okay, because this correspondence could be between.
She's a columnist, Nick.
Okay, I see that now. Yep.
For Daily Mail. Daily Mail seems to be a center figure of a lot of these email communications.
Okay, so if she's a columnist with the Daily Mail, and it's very likely that this email chain was back and forth to her. And
so these did not come from the documents just released?
They did, but they were from October of 2016. Seems like.
Okay, thank you.
This one that you just posted in the Nest about Hillary Clinton is pretty intense. It says, a couple months later, she was then approached by special agents forces men sent directly by Hillary Clinton herself in order to protect her presidential campaign. And then it goes on later. She was then given a substantial payout directly from the Clinton Foundation to keep her quiet. Like, it obviously this is not proven in a court of law, but the allegations there are very striking.
You're right with that, yeah.
But you'd think there'd be some sort of investigation into this, Doc. Like, even if this stuff was filed civilly, you know, and the authorities weren't notified and such. But I've never heard of any sort of investigation into this.
Into Clinton. When you say this, I mean, can you be more specific?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Clinton's paying off girls and using the FBI to cover it up.
Well, that assumes that somebody in authority, some legal authority, had knowledge of this, and that assumes that they're ethical, moral, and are willing to take on the power base that Hillary Clinton has represented for the last 30 years. And it assumes that our Justice Department, or whatever Justice Department might have, jurisdiction on this matter would have acted appropriately. So, no, I think that a lot of this stuff is coming out in part because a lot of the people that have been accused or alleged to have committed crimes or civil torts are beyond the statute of limitations. And I mentioned that in the room the other night, in that most of these crimes either were not committed in a U.S. jurisdiction. Of course, that's why the island was offshore. Or two, they're outside the statute of limitations. And we did see that there is the power to sort of go after these people potentially with what we saw done in New York, right? In New York, they extended for 1 year the statute of limitations so that Mary Jean Carroll could go ahead and file a suit against Trump, which she won, of course, because the court was fixed. I mean, they changed the law just to go after him. Didn't go after anyone else under that law, and the law is now expired, so it can't be used by some of these girls, right? Assuming New York has jurisdiction, which I'm assuming they would on the Epstein and Maxwell crimes, because Epstein lived in New York. So no, our justice system is entirely corrupt, and particularly in New York, and has been for a long, long time. I think that's what this proves.
So, Johnny, a lot of these pieces. So we saw in 2016 with Sarah Ransom going back and forth with this Daily Mail columnist, and some of this information about going to Moscow police to aid them in stopping Hillary or Trump from, in this context, I guess we'll go ahead and say, from getting elected, because it was literally a month, days, actually, a couple of weeks before the election in 2016 that she's saying this. The information that she came out with, and that she's been, talking about how she's also gone to Russian papers, and she called Hillary Clinton an evil bitch. And I think other panelists have called her that up here before. I won't mention who. But none of this stuff, was there any big pieces in the Daily Mail back then that had any of this stuff in it? Would they have found her, non-credible?
I don't think the Mail's the type to find people non-credible. They like to publish everything unless it's going to cause them massive trouble. And I tell you, the Clintons are going to sue anybody, or threaten to sue anybody to keep this in for as long as possible. And they've done a good job of that, haven't they? I mean, it's quite interesting that a lot of the people who we see as well, when we look at David Bowies, who represents a lot of these Epstein victims, he runs in a lot of the same circles as the Clintons. He represented Harvey Weinstein and stuff. So it's really interesting that a lot of her legal team are also kind of in the same circles as the people who she's so afraid of. She's so afraid. It seems like they've got her in a bit of a net. Some of the language is true. It's like the term "that paedophile Trump," she says. So I mean, that's like really heavy language. It seems very and it seems she's aiming at both parties. I mean, that's Hillary and Trump. If this is that election, then she's spreading her fire all over the place. And by this point, I think she's angry at everybody, and I don't blame her.
Was she very vocal before this time, though? When would you say that she first came around? She first came about and started making accusations, because this is really obviously pretty late in the game in terms of, I believe, Giuffre had come out years before this.
Yeah, Giuffre came. She came out in the case in 2014, and I can't for the life of me remember when Sarah Ransom got involved. When I started to notice Sarah Ransom's name wasn't until about 2019. So it might be that all of this stuff is going on behind the scenes. But I very early on in this case, I was very focused elsewhere. I was very focused on the intelligence aspects. It was only in about 2020 1991 that I started to really like research for One Nation and the blackmail, all of the espionage, the blackmailing, and all of the influence operation. But Sarah Ransom came up as central then. She's like, I could never read who she was. She didn't seem like, and I have to say this as a personal, this is a subjective opinion. I didn't see her as potentially guilty. I felt like she was different from the rest of them, and this shows that she was really, really different. I think this might show that in her character, she might be quite rash, willing to say the things that need to be said, that scare other people. These things are dangerous when you're working in intelligence, or around people who do that.
So, guys, just to remind the audience here, we're going through the documents here in real time with the team in the background, posting tweets up to the top that will give context to a lot of things that we're talking about. If you guys find anything yourselves and you want to let us know, you can either DM it to us. You can put it down there in the bottom right-hand corner. We definitely go through those comments, questions. If you want to add on to what one of our panelists is saying, definitely put it right down there as well. And like I said, the team goes through it as well, and as well as me personally go through and scroll it. Doc, to kind of add on to a little bit of something that you were talking about earlier in terms of how they release these documents, do they do this in any particular order, or is there a reason they don't just dump them all at the same time?
No, I mean that really would be up to the court clerk. I doubt that there's any sort of rhyme or reason or manipulation. That would be in normal course. You don't get sort of document dumps like this unorganized at a court. So I mean, it's very structured, and the admission of evidence and the control of evidence, the submission of evidence into the court, the striking of evidence by objection of the other party. One of the things that you should be looking for is what's called a Bates stamp, BATES. A Bates stamp is a way that documents are marked by attorneys submitting them into court. So there's a common point of reference as to page numbers and locating the document within the court filing. So if you see something that represents to be from a court filing that doesn't have a Bates stamp on it, and the Bates stamp is usually, it can be really in any corner of the document, and it's usually, let me say, six decimal places, but 6 figures, and so it'll be 000 001 for the first one. Assuming that you're going to have 100,000 documents, that way, as you start out numbering at 1, you have a way to account individually for each particular document with a Bates stamp assignment. So I haven't really had the time, honestly, to go through and do what Ryan and the team is doing to look at these documents as an original source. But that's one thing that I'd be looking at to confirm that they actually are from the court.
Doc, I have a question for you real quick. So we know about this case. Are there other cases out there that have potential of releasing documents, or is this the only one with Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, the FBI has, any number of quote unquote investigations they're pursuing, as does the New York Police Department. You'll recall that when they secured the Anthony Weiner laptop, that the consistent reporting was been that when the New York City detectives investigated and looked at the contents, they were throwing up and they're very upset. Now, as I understand it, that material was confiscated or turned over to the FBI. It may very well be that there is an ongoing investigation from the New York City Police Department or district attorney or attorney general. But particularly when it comes to federal prosecutions, there's no duty to announce that to the public beforehand. So it's certainly possible. But given the bright light that's been on all this for such a long time, it would be a surprise to me if there's something ongoing in that way. Of course, we can also look at 2 other sources, I think. One is the investigation into Hunter Biden, which really should be an investigation into Jim, Hunter, and Joe Biden. And then there's the Congressional Committee headed by Congressman Cromer, they're doing their own investigation. They have a separate sort of power, but that power, of course, is still restrained by any lack of cooperation from the U.S. Attorney General's office.
So So one of the things with these documents being released, like for a guy like me, I look at anybody that is surrounding this, and my mind immediately goes, they're all guilty, right? Like I can't stand pedophiles, and I think that anybody that messes with them. Here's my position: is that everybody. So I have had to raise a lot capital in my lifetime for my projects, and everybody in my circle since the late '80s. I'm an old man, you guys, since the late '80s has known this guy was a pedophile. So for me, anybody that chose to be around this guy has got stink on him. I don't care if it's Clinton, I don't care if it's Trump, I don't care who it is. Like anybody that hung around this guy has stink on him. They knew, everybody knew this. That's the part that I don't hear people talking about is, man, if I knew over here on the West Coast that man was a pedophile years ago, then you got to believe that over in the social circles on the East Coast that they all knew. And so if they chose to hang around him, like everybody deserves the fire they got coming towards them. I don't care who
So
they are or what party they're in.
So, guys, we have another email from the victim to the Daily Mail columnist. And the thing is, this is more of direct. Her aim was to directly interfere with the election. She says, seemingly, as my and my fiance's life is in danger, and there's nothing has been done, even though I've been in every evidence of. Give me 1 second, guys. Even though even though I have every bit of evidence to implicate all parties mentioned, mark my words that I am sure that neither that evil bitch Hillary or pedophile Trump gets elected. I will make sure that everyone on the goddamn planet sees the footage and photos will be released them to the WikiLeaks as of Sunday. So I will take down. This is crazy. I will take down Epstein and a bunch of his fuck. I
Ryan.
got a call. Yes. What point did I cut off?
I will take down.
Yep.
Okay.
I will take down.
Okay, I'll just read that part again. Mark my words, I will make sure that neither evil bitch Hillary or oh my god, I keep getting calls from the team.
Somebody really.
Yeah, it's the team.
Really don't
I
like
told her,
her.
Jess, if you're listening, I got the call. I got it. I got it.
Hillary's calling.
It's not Hillary, it's our team. Sorry, guys. Mark my words, I will make sure that neither that evil bitch Hillary or pedophile Trump gets elected. I will also make sure that everyone on the goddamn planet sees the footage and photos and will release them to WikiLeaks by Sunday. I will take down Epstein and a bunch of his fuckwit cronies myself. I've gone to the Russian newspaper, seeming as the U.S. government won't let me surprise. I will do it myself, and I will make sure, as I have. You've just lost your exclusive. I am super fucked off now. So that's that's an intense email, and sorry about the
Johnny, it seems
disconnects.
like Johnny, it seems like even the Daily Mail didn't want to take this story.
No one would want to take this story. Hey, there's something else that is really important. So what Eugene was saying there, where he was saying, everybody knew. I don't think that. I think that's a lot more nuanced. I think a lot of people just turn off their radar a lot of the time. They go into a place, there's loads of young girls, and they don't do connecting. And they had a way of making the operation look like it was just a normal massage thing. But you're talking, Sarah Ransom was in employ in 2006. The case had already been started in 2005. So he had already been arrested. So a lot of these people who were with them were working for him while they knew that he was going through this process, and they must have continued to see the behavior, because he continued with the behavior anyway. So there is a lot to be said about how, if you go work for someone and you see them committing crimes, what's the obligation? You have to inform somebody. And I also want to say hi to Jason Bamas, who's just come up here. He's one of my favorite people on earth.
Well, thank you, Johnny. Let me jump in if I can and go back to a couple of questions that were asked about documents and whether we're going to get more than just this case. I'd just like to point out that there have been several cases out there via J.P. Morgan, via the Virgin Islands in suits and countersuits, where we started to get more insight into the banking industry. J.P. Morgan in particular was just Jess Staley, Jamie Dimon himself. And just like these are lawsuit documents that have taken an exponential amount of time to come out, a lot of them dating back to, the beginning of this and into 2014, 15, and 16 with depositions. I'd like to remind people that it was like last year that we got a lot of this information. For instance, Leonardo DiCaprio is in the news. Well, we knew he was in the Rolodex and apparently on speed dial. We knew that William Burns of the CIA was also there. We learned that Peter Thiel had meetings scheduled in 2014 with Epstein, well after it was known what he was in the public arena. So this stuff, Noam Chomsky would be another one, has kind of been out for some time. Ronsome has made these claims now, again, probably for the better part of 4 or 5 years, saying that she had videotapes. I'm not discounting that could be a possibility. However, this claim has been made by other individuals who then left the country and never produced them. There have been claims of dead man switches in the past that have never come to fruition when high profile figures have died. And I just want to remind everybody that Bannon, again, Steve Bannon, is sitting on tapes from an interview, I believe it was back in 2017, several of them, between 15 and 18 hours, if you believe the public reports. And he himself put out that short trailer for The Monsters. Again, Megyn Kelly has alluded to the idea that we may be hearing from Epstein himself shortly. I would imagine that would be the only arena that we would hear from Epstein is those tapes. So I think we're going to get a trickle of these documents, not only over the next week, but probably the next couple of weeks, maybe even until the 22nd of this month, when they're going to rule on Jane Doe 107 and whether her name will be redacted. So I think there is a lot more to come. I think that the fact that this is now in the public arena, that people are questioning the evidence that was at least seized in the New York raid of the burned discs, of the folders, of the hard drives, is where we really have to keep this and then put pressure on those that have been named as more than just associates and really question the associates that have been named in these documents. Thank you.
Can I just say that it was on this space that the other day where I got Alex Jones to say he will ask Steve Bannon to release those tapes. He promised me. So Alex Jones better be doing that right now.
Don't bet on Bannon releasing those tapes while he's under federal investigation for indictment for fraud. That might be the only thing that's keeping him from being actively prosecuted. That's total speculation on my part, but I do know he's been indicted relative to the fundraising for We Build a Wall campaign.
Can I just really quickly highlight what Jason just said a second ago? Jason made so many good connections just now, and one name that he brought up was Peter Thiel. And it's important to remember that these technology connections that Jeffrey Epstein had are largely unexplored in the case filings because they're not directly associated with sexual abuse victims. But that doesn't mean we don't know anything about how the two sides of this case interface. And once you bring in a name like Peter Thiel was a large amount of the seed funding for the entirety of Ethereum, which is an entire rabbit hole of dark money that can't be traced in a lot of ways. Peter Thiel is deeply connected to intelligence agency operations of all sorts. So it's just as a reminder that these documents are all focused on the sexual abuse allegations and that side of the operation, but we really have a lot of opaqueness when it comes to how those funds and how those operations interface with all sorts of other technology and intelligence industries that we can only imply from all of this.
I wanted to chime in and ask Doc to expound on. He said that Steve Bannon wouldn't release his tapes. What's the reasoning behind that? Would it be some kind of evidentiary, confidentiality
No,
requirement?
I think it's just leverage. It's just me just going off on a tangent, honestly, because I know from my relationship with Dustin and Jennifer, who worked with Steve Bannon on building the wall project back in 2017, 2018, that Bannon is hamstrung in part in discussing at least some of the issues relating to Dustin and Jen's persecution from the federal government, that Steve is sort of handcuffed in his relationship with them and trying to deal with that situation for them over the past few years, because he really can't comment because he's under federal investigation. But if he's got dirt related to Epstein, we can only speculate what that might be. But if it is as consequential as Alex Jones thinks it might be, that's certainly very, very powerful leverage against the deep state and the lawfare that's going on, broad base, as the Democrats and the globalists try to cling on to power in front of the 2024 election. So again, just me wildly speculating, but I do know that he is under investigation.
But very quickly, I say about that, the compromise, the idea that compromise could come out, compromise information could come out, is enough to re-compromise people. So it means that Bannon has got a load of power just because people know that Epstein could have said something. They don't need to know. As long as they know that they did something wrong with Epstein, then they think that Bannon has power over them. So if Bannon thinks they did something with Epstein, he could then use that as a leverage which is then secondary compromise.
Sure, it's just same game theory as bluffing in poker, right? You don't have to be holding a royal flush if somebody believes you are.
Right, and who can risk that, right? In the past, the risks are starting to drop for Bannon, because this information that he may be holding back on is now maybe coming out, with these leaks from the court. So as these leaks come out, if they're associated with the material that Epstein in that interview might have confirmed, well, then it's not as big a deal. It's not as much leverage. But if it's more, or if it corroborates some of the accusations, say the accusations this young woman, what's her name, Sarah Ransom, is making. I mean, let's assume for a second that what her accusations about Trump are true, right? No reason to believe that. These are just accusations. I don't know the source of this. It seems to have been a deposition or a declaration, but someone sent me the original page number from the release, and I looked through it, and she definitely accuses Trump of being a pedophile, of liking one of the girl's nipples, and so I won't go further than that. But if that's true, that's a fucking bombshell. And you can be sure the Krassensteins today, among a number of others, will be talking about that particular section of exposure.
So let me jump in on the Trump stuff from the very beginning, because I think there has to be certain types of acknowledgments, not only on the relationship of Trump, but what evidence is publicly available for you either to dismiss or say that this is solid. For instance, before the first document dumps that we were seeing back in 2019, in which Virginia Roberts Giuffre confirmed that Trump had ridden on Jeffrey Epstein's planes, although it was not in the previously released flight logs, because they were only partial. I mean, there were partial flight logs of just one of the jets. Remember, this guy had several different modes of transportation that would have logs. You had the Vanity Fair article that had already confirmed that Epstein had ridden on Trump's plane, and Trump in that article actually scolds Jeffrey Epstein for being late. And I would point that out, and conservatives would just totally and completely dismiss it. Now, Trump ran beauty pageants. I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that on some level, this is part of his persona. Melania is wife 3. The guy openly bragged about the women he dated for years. And I'm not saying that this report is correct, but anybody can look it up. There is the allegation out there. Hold on.
Jason, let me stop you.
Wait.
Let
me
stop
finish
you
this last
here
point,
because
please.
you're
Please
talking.
let me
Hey,
respond.
Doc. I'm gonna let Jason finish. I'll let you respond, Doc. Go ahead, Jason. Bottom left-hand corner, got to unmute.
We're back. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. So again, I'm just saying these are reports in the mainstream media that Epstein actually had a party of 20 women, one of which was Melania, basically auditioning for wife number 3. Now you have to remember, a lot of these people that are abused, they're abused as teenagers, but some of them take to it. I've often talked about Ghislaine Maxwell's other madams that have been accused. Nadia Marcinkova, we got more information on her literally on Friday. You had Leslie Groff and Sarah Kalin. So this is a possibility. And those that just throw it out, I think are doing themselves a disservice. We don't know where the information is going to go. I'm not accusing the man of anything, but we have to realize that these allegations are out there.
Doc?
Okay, so let me respond and inform some people here of some facts. One, the fact that you conducted a beauty pageant does not mean you're a pedophile. 2, one that you got married 3 times doesn't mean you're a pedophile. Okay, the fact is that James Patterson, who's a member of Mar-a-Lago and a resident of Palm Beach and a known associate, wrote a very famous book, should be more famous, right? It's called Filthy Rich. Within there's a chapter where he describes the initial interaction and relationships between Trump, Maxwell, and Epstein at Mar-a-Lago. And Trump was directly responsible for the first arrest down in Florida of Epstein. And here's the facts, right? And there's also a Netflix special that came out about this, right? About this book. So what this Netflix special did not discuss is the chapter about how Epstein approached the young daughter of a member at a woman's bathroom or locker room, propositioned her, and the member then went to Trump. Trump then, Epstein was not a member, but a guest of Maxwell's, who was a member, reported that to the Palm Beach police, and that was the beginning of the investigation into Epstein's association with the trafficking women. So that's a published book. James Patterson is one of the most preeminent authors in America. No one has ever come out that I've heard that disclaimed or disproved any of that fact pattern. So,
okay, so if I can,
push back.
if I can just respond to that. Number one, I never said that there was any evidence that Trump was a pedophile.
No, you inferred it. You inferred it.
I did not infer it.
Yes,
actually.
you did. You put one thing next to the other and tried to draw an association.
I never made any pedophilia claims whatsoever. And I didn't put any. And again, Doc, if you'll let me just respond, I'm not angry at you. I'd just like to point out.
No,
I've
but
also,
if you're going to lie, I'm going to talk over you.
Well, I didn't lie.
Okay.
I mean, again, you can go to the record.
Yeah,
okay. Well, you can infer what you like.
I understand the rhetorical tools that you're using. Okay, and I'm not going to let you use
rhetorical
them.
tools. I've read the book.
Hold on. If I can just respond.
Gentlemen,
again,
gentlemen, please.
Just respond.
One at a time,
gentlemen.
Gentlemen, please, one at a time. We're all friends here. We're all here, have a discussion, go through some documents. It's hard to read when you guys are screaming. If you can go one at a time, we can have a cool civil conversation.
Thank you.
And Dr. Anna, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I've read Filthy Rich. I reported on that as well. It does not seem, although the incident that he's talking about did take place, and it's actually Virginia Roberts through this documentation, and it wasn't a member, it was somebody who worked for Trump at the club. They have the letters from Trump to this guy. Again, well aware of all this stuff. I'm just putting into the public arena what is already out there, and I'm not dismissing that there was a relationship between Epstein and Trump. Now, there's that story that may be the fallout. We also have Bradley Edwards, who is a lawyer on the case, who openly has talked about Trump being the only person of any significance that cooperated with him. I've reported on that as well. But again, to just dismiss outright, for instance, Trump, and again, this is not part of the Epstein case, but Katie Johnson made allegations against Trump when she was 16 years old. Again, not saying that they're true, but you can watch her videotaped deposition. Those were taken care of in a legal manner. So for me, I'm just putting out, again, what we have in documents, what people involved in the case have said. And I just don't think that we should be surprised if Trump continually comes up and if something does come out that puts him in an awkward light. That's all.
I have
Yeah,
a question
so
for Doc. I have a question for Doc. Doc, if people are looking at pictures of underage girls on the internet, is that a pedophile?
Yeah, pedophiles tend to collect pictures of underage children. I've
Okay,
seen the
so
laptops of convicted pedophiles. I can tell
so
you
my
that's
point
pretty common.
my point is that Trump publicly bragged that he would go into the backside where the girls were changing. These were all young underage girls. Bragged about it because he was the owner and he was allowed to do that. That's like that to me
Yeah, well,
was
those are not
clear of who
underage
this man
girls
was.
in the Miss
It
Universe
was the
pageant.
it was the teenage pageant that he was talking about.
Okay,
Go
well,
look it up.
you want to go hate Trump? Go ahead.
So, gentlemen,
Go
we
ahead.
have a new
Go
post
ahead.
that went up. Give me one
Really
second,
don't give a
please.
fuck.
We're happy to have both of you here. Listen, new post just went up. Epstein files, girls had weight requirements. Quote, if you don't lose weight, they would cut me out of their financially off. I would lose I would lose the place that I was staying at. I would lose my education, you name it. They bullied me with everything, just like they did with the other, which I'm assuming is other girls. So technically it's a little bit, the English isn't perfect, but it's like they would cut them off financially if they didn't meet certain weight limits.
I actually found a few other instances of those exact same claims, accusations made by Sarah in emails. Quote, I am not prepared to go under 56 kilograms in order to study at FIT. I also need a flight booked, blah, 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 blah. And then later on, she also says, statute of limitations. She testified that she was actively working on her FIT application based on the false promises that Epstein and Maxwell would assist her in her enrollment and pay for her schooling. They would withhold food from her as punishment if she didn't do what they asked.
If I could take it a step further on what Epstein preferred and demanded in his girls, because again, this guy was the main abuser of these girls and then, would later compromise people. He had a dental chair in one of the establishments, and his last girlfriend, actually the last person to visit him while he was in Metro alive, is also a dentist. And you guys can look into the stories there where he would make these girls literally get dental work on the property to his preference. So yeah, this guy was a major control freak that did have a certain type, made them look a certain way, and you were either with the program or you weren't.
Could I speak for a second, Nick or Ryan?
Sure,
Yeah.
Jack.
So I just wanted to basically say that some of what someone has said on this panel is incorrect. There is no evidence that Donald Trump. I am not saying that Donald Trump is guilty of anything here. Okay, I don't think we have allegations here that would support that in any sense. But there is no proof that Donald Trump reported Jeffrey Epstein to the police. In fact, if you look at
It's recorded in it's recorded in James Patterson's book. I'll get you the page.
I really, could you please not speak, Doc? If you actually look at the timing, what you'll see is that Epstein was actually brought before the court initially in 2005, and he was banned from Mar-a-Lago in 2007. So it can't be correct. The only evidence is an unsupported allegation in a book by a novelist. This is not true. Now, you can say he banned him for good reason. You can say whatever you want to about why. I don't care. But the fact is that Donald Trump did not report Jeffrey Epstein to the Palm Beach police. That is just a misstatement. Thank you.
You are mistaken or you're lying. Either one.
Can I add some important context about Trump that's more like actual factual history, just for us all to remember the complexity of Trump's involvement? Is Trump was largely mentored by Roy Cohn in his youth. And it's important to remember that people grow and change throughout their lives, and they need to be judged continually for their actions and judged for their past actions. But Cohn brought Trump up, and Cohn was heavily involved in the Blue Suite parties, FBI sex situations, and all sorts of strange, dark dealings in the past that's pretty well documented. And Trump later bought the Plaza Hotel once it was up for sale that had that Blue Suite in it. And Trump's history is one of hosting lavish parties, but never like quote unquote participating himself, not drinking, not doing drugs. And so there's a complex history of being brought up by a person that was heavily involved in sexual blackmail, and Trump having very deep awareness of that scene, very probably, but not. And so the fact that he's risen to the power that he has with that type of knowledge of how the inner workings of politics works could imply that he is in some way involved, not necessarily as a patron of these activities, but at least as a person that's aware of their implicit like impact on politics. And it's just important to remember that Trump is involved in these things in some ways, and it's not necessarily as a perpetrator of sexual abuse, but there's so much complexity that we should just keep it in mind that it's not black and white. You're either a pedophile or not. You're either guilty or not. It's very complex history.
And by
Yeah,
the
so while we
way,
continue
Nick,
to,
I have a copy of the police report, the initial Epstein Palm Beach police report, which only mentions complaints by the girls in question, not by Donald Trump. So I'm happy to post
is
that.
this from 2006?
This is from 2005, I believe, maybe 2006, but I'll check the date.
Got it. Thank you, Tara. Dr. Anastasia Lupus, it's a pleasure to have you up on the stage. How are you? What are your thoughts overall as we go through these documents in the background? The team's doing it. We're making tweets up at the top. All of them are pinned up in a thread so everybody can go through and kind of get some context here.
Hi, Nick.
Thank you, Ryan, for facilitating that. But good to have you, Doctor.
Hi, Nick. I just got home, so I just got on, and I just saw some posts from Mario, but I didn't catch up on the latest file drop.
No worries. We'll help you out. If you go to the page,
Yeah.
everything you need is there. We'd love to have your thoughts on the stuff.
But to try to keep dragging Donald Trump into this is kind of ridiculous, because it was the same yesterday. I think it was a front page from I don't remember if it was the Daily Mail but it was about the badge drop and the names, and there was Donald Trump on a picture with Epstein. And why not take one with Bill Clinton, and because we know that they have been involved with these crimes, and they have even funded these girls through the Clinton Foundation. So why would they bring up a picture with Donald Trump? It's just ridiculous that they're trying to do this. So as far as I can see, he's kind of not under any suspicion anymore, right? So it's just
but it
like
almost seems. Yeah, I'm sorry.
they
Go ahead.
have to drag him into this, and I think that it would be more relevant to talk about some of the others. Another name that dropped was that today, Richard Branson.
Yes, Richard Branson was new today.
Yeah, and some other big names. So why pick a picture with Trump? That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, but doesn't it seem that if Donald Trump was actually implicated in these crimes, and there was credible evidence of any sort, that based on the amount that Donald Trump is being attacked right now, all the indictments, I mean, they're probably going to indict him for jaywalking or something in the next few days. I mean, they're trying to indict him on absolutely everything they can.
Exactly. That's my point with choosing his picture with Epstein and not everybody else. At this point, they just want to drag him into anything. So that just it doesn't work on me, at least. I don't think people should fall for that.
Yeah, well, I think
there are other people we have more on, like the Clintons, right? And they want them to stay out of this mess, and we should not do that.
Right, absolutely. I think that's pretty much an accepted fact at this point, that surprises absolutely nobody. So there's no shock value for the Daily Mail, really.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so obvious that they would choose the one picture with Donald Trump and Epstein. And we know they do that, so we just should not fall for that. We should keep looking at the criminals.
So if I could jump in on these documents and the Clintons, I just want to say that from the documents that have been released, really the significant stuff, the stuff that we might not have known about, are more focused on Hillary Clinton. And I brought up the fact, again, largely unreported in the mainstream media. Actually, the Daily Mail did the story years ago now. But the fact that Bill and Hillary Clinton essentially had a secondary residence on the Zorro Ranch residence that was never investigated. And remember, Bill Richardson, who was the governor of New Mexico and has been named for years, he passed away this year, a big part of the Clinton Foundation and their initiatives, a big leftist. He actually ran for president back in 2008. And you'll remember, or maybe you won't, but years ago, Eric Prince was alluding to Hillary Clinton's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And again, from the revelations that are coming out, that's where you see Hillary Clinton possibly bankrolling some of the foundations and movements of Ghislaine Maxwell behind the scenes. So, as far as, again, this document dump, I would say that that is much more significant than the Bill likes some young comment. You start following the finances of these people. And I think that that's really where the media doesn't want to go, but also the close relationship, not only of Bill, but Hillary, well in the know.
Jason, these documents, as far as I can tell, actually don't go to the issue of the ranch. So what you're talking about might have been in previous documents, in rolling distributions previously, but these particular documents, as far as I can tell, and I think I've tried to read all of them, don't go to that issue, do they?
I wasn't talking about that specifically. I was talking about the mainstream reporting on the ranch. I was talking about the financing of Hillary Clinton to Ghislaine Maxwell. That's what these new documents reveal.
Really? Where do these new documents reveal the financing
Hold
per
on a
se?
second. Let me look up the specific article. I think I read it on Friday, and I will give you that.
The only thing that I ever remember was there was a request to see if the Clintons had made donations to Maxwell in any form, or the Clinton Foundation, or vice versa. But I don't remember.
So I have
anything.
something juicy coming for you a
Yep.
little bit later, Tira.
Sure.
I found, but something new that we just found and posted is another set of emails between Sarah and someone with the letter name M. We don't know what this name is. This is a back and forth between them. And a snippet of the email goes to say that what I did was wrong, and I spent the last 10 years trying to forget what happened on the island. This is from Sarah. There are more girls, Marine, more than you can ever imagine. So Marine is the M. So kind of they redacted it up top, but they gave it away here. They're scared, and so am I. But Jeffrey, Clinton, and Trump must pay for what they did to us, and as must the rest of the men that were involved in their seedy inner circle. We have to get the rest of the girls to come forward somehow. So Maureen is, I'm assuming, the columnist at Daily Mail. So there's a lot of back and forth with people from Daily Mail, other news publications, because you're trying to like get it out. Remember in the email that we discussed 15 minutes ago, she also reached out to WikiLeaks and Anonymous with this information as well, allegedly.
Well, once again, procedurally, what's happening here is Alan Dershowitz is very concerned that depositions will be released sort of unchallenged, right? Because I think Virginia Giuffre was seeking to remove the protective orders. And so what he's saying here is that there are that the Sarah Ransom is not credible, and there's these allegations she's made, and we have to be allowed to release our own material that will prove that she is not credible. So once again, this is just allegations and people saying certain things. And look, I'm not a Trump supporter, but honestly, anybody can say anything. These have not been sort of verified in any sense.
I could say the same thing about the Clintons. I just want to say once again, to me, anybody connected or in this, everybody knew since the late 80s, knew who Epstein was. Everybody. Like, I don't buy this, like, well, there might have been massages and they didn't know. Everybody knew. Like, this has been an open secret for a long, long time. So if you chose to hang out with him, that's on you, and you deserve every bit of fire you got coming. I don't care if you're Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, or Donald Trump. Like, I don't care. Like, they all deserve the fire they got coming, and investigations. Like, we should be not taking sides in this thing of political. This is not about political. This man hurt children. There are children that suffered and are hurt, and we're listening to the testimony of that hurt. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't care what their name was. And I think this defending each part because they're in my party or your party or whatever, like, this is harming children by us doing this. That's all I got. Thanks.
But I think we got to keep in mind. We got to keep in mind that we're in an election year too, right? And this type of rhetoric, this type of material is going to be blasted across the internet to smear potential presidential candidates, right? So to say it's not political at this time, I feel like is a little bit of an overstatement.
Definitely political. Hey, the thing is that you've got to realize something that no one's factoring in here. There's been a passage of time, and in that time, Donald Trump has gone from being really on the Democratic side to being over there on the Republican side, and that switch there is really important factor that I don't think people are thinking about with this, because he was involved in the party that Epstein was really centrally involved in kingmaking in. Epstein wasn't involved, didn't really care about Republicans. He was there over on the left, and he was working within the left. And Trump at that time was meandering over in the left, but had his fingers in lots of other pies. And now he's, of course, on the Republican Party. And I think that might have been a very astute and intelligent political move by Trump that let him distance himself from something that him and his advisors may have known was coming with Jeffrey Epstein.
I just wanted to chime in real quick, and I think both Diligent and Eugene, I think, made a really good point that we do it to keep the victims in mind, and the end of the day, it is ultimately about that. But I think to Diligent's point, though, is it is an election year, and ever since 2020, American politics it's become, I'm sure we all know the term October surprise, right? Save some big damaging story to hit your opponent right to change people's mind at the last minute. And it's like ever since 2020, it's like been a nonstop October surprise open season. I mean, we're openly campaigning against politicians who aren't. It's not even in campaign season. So I have to think both of those perspectives have to be kept in mind. But very, very good points by both of you guys.
Yeah, I'll admit it does have very much political implications considering who was involved in this. I will admit that, but I just don't want to forget the victims of this. That there's a horror of a string of victims behind each and every. Like, I don't know who was involved, but each of those people that were involved left victims behind them. That's all. But there is absolutely political implications. I'm using them. Are you kidding?
It's also worth noting that just by maybe happenstance, that probably the Republican frontrunner is old enough that his name is coming up here, but we're not really sure who the Democratic frontrunner is going to be at this point, because there's rumors that Joe Biden's going to step down. It's hard to say, and so there's sort of a political imbalance in terms of implications and which sides can and can't use these things as blackmail or as a political firebrand, and so it's just worth keeping in mind that there is an imbalance in power in the political reporting surrounding these narratives that will affect how it's reported.
But Ian, right now the
real
front
quick,
runner
guys,
is
if I could
Joe
step in.
Biden, and he is not mentioned. So there isn't really an imbalance in that sense. He's just sort of not mentioned. I don't know. Maybe I have not heard his name mentioned in connection with this. So that you're speculating that there might be someone else. But right now we have two older people, both of whom could have been implicated. And like I said, I am not suggesting Donald Trump did or did not do certain things. But there are two names that we know of right now, and one of them has been mentioned in the documents.
I completely agree, Terry. Good clarification. I guess what I'm saying is we should encourage the public to keep their eyes out for the Democratic Party switching lanes quickly, because it is potentially on their table. It's within their power to switch lanes to another candidate, and it would be a very savvy tactical move if they do.
So if I can get us back on topic for a second, I appreciate that the deviations in between things that come up, because it's definitely a key point that this definitely might be some political involvement here. But a photo that we posted earlier, we zoomed in and it was an unidentified male on the island in 2006. One of our teammates, very savvy eye, was able to identify this person to be the ex-Labor Minister, Peter Mendelsohn, former British cabinet member, was seen with Jeffrey in 2006.
And so, Johnny, I know you were kind of going over this earlier in the space when you had seen him in the picture as well. Can you kind of tell the audience a little bit about who this guy is, why he's significant, and why it's significant that he's in these photos?
Hey, he's one of the most powerful people on the left of British politics. There's over the past maybe 30 years, there's maybe more than that. You don't know. He's known as the Dark Lord. He's a great manipulator. He's the guy who, like, if you want, like, to know how Israel got created, you'd have to go to Nahum Goldman in the back rooms, working at all the angles and being a great orchestrator of an event, making people do things. That's what Peter Mandelson is. He was the type of person, I think, who ran a similar role, culturally different. There's a different tone, culturally speaking, to connect with British people and British politicians. So he does it slightly differently. But I think he kind of was intelligence linked over on the British, high up in the Labour Party, deciding who are going to be the top dogs. And if you don't have the support of Peter Mandelson, well, he basically, without Peter Mandelson, New Labour would never have happened. Tony Blair would never have happened. Gordon Brown would never have happened. All of that era, Ed Balls, Ed Miliband, Yvette Cooper, these are all people who Peter Mandelson got behind and helped rise up. And I think he's very much like that kingmaker of the left, which Epstein was, and the left of American politics. And that's why they saw that in each other. They knew that. Loads of connections, loads deep.
And so I guess, I've been corrected in the audience. Thank you guys for giving me some context here. It's now Lord Mandelson, actually. Funny enough.
No. It's the Dark Lord. It's the Dark Lord, Peter Mandelson. Everybody knows that.
But doesn't that all jokes
Many of
aside,
us
doesn't
thought
that
that was
exempt him?
Voldemort, but okay.
But guys, doesn't that exempt him from prosecution in England if they're a lord? Isn't there some law where if you're knighted or lord, if
you can get away? Yeah, you can get away with a lot. Yeah, there's
very clever.
It's the same with the royal family. You know, we talked on one of the other spaces about Prince Andrew and whether he'll end up facing any prosecution, but within no time the police had withdrawn any charges, because it's really hard to prosecute lords and ladies and all of the upper class. We know it. We know why. The crown is on the police uniform. It's on the police emblem, and that's one of the things we're discussing here. We're discussing the influence of the rich and powerful elite upon our society and how it affects us on a political level, because we're all it always comes down to us talking about the politics of it. You know, this is why this is so interesting.
Yeah, so going back a little bit to those emails that we saw from Sarah Ransom to the Daily Mail columnist Maureen Callahan back in October of 2016, just before the presidential election, the U.S. presidential election, where she said she wanted to, quote, make sure Trump or Clinton won't get through, meaning that neither of them would be elected. She had given, her story to the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail chose not to run the story. She said that she gave it to a Russian newspaper who also didn't run the story, gave it to WikiLeaks and Anonymous. Neither of them ran with any information. So it's almost, Johnny, is it difficult to believe that there's really anything credible here to some of her allegations?
This is why when I contact people, because I tried to create back channels with Sarah recently to talk to her about some of this, and it seemed like she was talking to someone I know and who knew that I was linked, and we were discussing it backwards and forwards. And I think the problem is whenever they have to go to someone who's going to investigate the claim, that person, whether the claim is fundamentally true or not, that person is going to, if they're a good investigator, find a load of nuances or contradictions. Time passes by, all of these different things. And a lot of the time, people don't actually want to hear how credible their own claim is. They've had a fire lit with them years ago. The situation changes. That fire doesn't go away. It's as passionate as it was before. So she could be possibly so angry and so, incensed over this period that all of this is true still now. But I think she'll have a lot of regrets about some of the things that she's done and said, and that comes out really in the fact I feel like I'd like to help with people like this to find a way out of this, because a lot of the time they're stuck in a system, they're stuck in a cycle, and that cycle is pretending that something isn't happening when it's actually happening.
Hey, Johnny, I have a question for you. I'm going back through some of the older reporting on Sarah Ransom right now. And am I seeing this correctly that Ransom's testimony back in like 2017 was a major part of the conviction of Jess Staley from JP Morgan due to her allegations about JP Morgan's involvement and such like that? Am I reading this correctly?
I don't know too much about that, and that's not an aspect I looked at.
Okay. Because there is an interesting excerpt here in a article from the Daily Beast that is going over the case in 2017 with Sarah Ransom, where it says the legal papers also highlight how Epstein, considered, quote, the biggest revenue producer from JP Morgan's private bank, referred high-powered clients, including the Google co-founder Sergey Brin, billionaire Leon Black, Britain's Prince Andrew, ex-White House counsel Kathy Rumler, and Donald Trump's former casino executive Nick Rebus. So in those legal documents, they claim that Epstein was the biggest revenue producer for JP Morgan's private bank, which is no small claim.
Wait, was Jess Staley convicted of a crime? Not that I'm aware of. Was he? Not yet. Ian?
I'm not entirely clear on a 100% answer there. I know that he stepped down, sort of as in taking the heat for Jamie Dimon at the time, is my understanding.
Well, I mean,
Let me
okay,
dig a little
so
more.
yeah, I don't think he was actually convicted, but Jess Staley had the relationship. JP Morgan has settled 2 suits, one with the Virgin Islands for 75 million, one with the accusers, the girls, for 290 million, I believe. And the gravamen of the complaint was that JP Morgan, they never actually alleged Jamie Dimon knew anything. It was more that JP Morgan failed to supervise and should have had constructive notice, in effect, that these funds that we were being given to a convicted sex offender were being used improperly, right?
Yes. Yeah, what I'm finding here is that Staley was not necessarily convicted in a court of law. Rather, he was banned from senior positions in the UK after he mischaracterized his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeff Epstein. And yeah, the settlements that JP Morgan went through, you're correct, they legally shielded Jamie Dimon from, conviction and or investigation. But it's important to just be aware that if Jamie Dimon, if his bank is receiving the most money of all from Jeffrey Epstein's referrals of high-powered clients, it's hard to imagine that Jamie Dimon doesn't at least have some awareness of who his highest grossing client is, so to speak, which is obviously just a speculation allegation.
And if I can just jump in on the JP Morgan stuff, in some of those privatized emails, it was so well known that Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile. The internal emails showed that they were joking that he would be dating Miley Cyrus next when she was a teenager.
Okay. So I got another audience response here, by the way, guys. Bottom right-hand corner, giving your tidbits. If you tag me in, it's easy for me to see it, by the way, as well. This is from Neckbeard Prime. Wanted to remind us here that Dark Lord Mandelson is openly gay, and he wants to know, is there any evidence at all that there were any male victims of Epstein, in terms of, maybe just young boys or young men being trafficked in other places, not necessarily to Epstein himself, but to, the other clients around the world?
I haven't heard about any boys, but I can tell you that I've heard rumors, and only rumors so far, never been able to clarify anything, and it's always come from sources which I think could be put there so that it does automatically, you don't believe the allegations that could be true. But there's Wexner allegations like that. I'm not sure. And of course, Les Wexner was Epstein's biggest funder, but I have not been able to find any concrete evidence of boys in my time that I've been looking.
Interesting. So I guess I don't know if anybody knows anything about the other forms of litigation that are going on right now against I believe J.P. Morgan Chase. Have they been, Tira? We were talking about this just a little bit. We just touched on it. Is there still a civil trial going on with J.P. Morgan Chase, and is there any sort of discovery that might come out about that at some point?
No, I don't think there's anything currently outstanding. Well, like I said, what has happened is there were 2 suits. There might be a third. I have to look. But U.S. Virgin Islands brought a suit that was settled for $75 million by Chase. Some of the women brought a suit, the victims, and that was settled for $290 million by J.P. Morgan Chase. I'm not aware of a third or a current suit, but I'm happy to be, to be shown to be wrong. I just don't know of anything currently as to which any additional discovery would come out.
Yes, you guys are still combing through this in the background. Ryan, what's our status? How are we looking back there? Anything juicy?
Yeah, I got one coming out in like 5 seconds. More emails, but this is a weirder one because I don't know who it's from and who it's to. Well, rather, I know who it's from, but I don't know who it's to. It's a little graphical, so just a fair warning for what I'm about to read in like 5 minutes.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that'll be good fun. Yeah. So the latest that we have here, we have just kind of recap for the room here a little bit. This is the first drop that we've really seen photos in of potential victims on the island itself. We've seen a lot from Sarah Ransom, which is another victim that we really haven't heard much from in this, from the previous drops at all. She's clearly very vocal. She was trying to derail the 2016 presidential election by going to WikiLeaks, the Russian media, Daily Mail, the Russian police even, and wasn't able to get anywhere with any of that for whatever reason. We don't exactly know why, although she ended up really putting a lot of these people on blast for not running with the story. We've seen Lord Mandelson of the UK in some of these photos on the island. And, it kind of gives us a lot more of a visual about what was actually going on Epstein Island. And there are a lot more claims against new people like Richard Branson, Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders of Google. And we're, still, like, this drops about 400 pages, so there's still a lot for us to go through here. And we don't know how these people are going to be further implicated, and whether or not they have any direct victims. This is the first time that I've really heard anything about Sergey Brin being involved in this whatsoever. Had anybody else heard about that before?
Yes, it's in the intelligentsia when they were going through his Rolodex. So that's the second list that comes up with Noam Chomsky and others. So yeah, that's been in the public arena.
And there was something in the J.P. Morgan case or the Jez Staley discovery that suggested that he had introduced Sergey Brin to J.P. Morgan. But of course, Elon Musk was also mentioned there, so I don't really know if that's particularly relevant or valid.
Just as a brief note on Sarah Ransom, this witness that's coming forward a lot more in these documents. In the same article that I'm here on the Daily Beast about this previous case that she had brought, she alleges, obviously this is just an allegation in an article that's coming from the court documents, that at one point she had kind of gone AWOL from Jeffrey's operation, and they found her while she was walking down the street, and she says presumably they tracked me on my BlackBerry, which is an allegation of, I mean, kind of staggering depth if you track those implications.
Yeah, there's a hell of a lot of. I mean, I'm just skimming these documents right now myself, and the team are really the ones that are doing the huge amount of work in the background here. And I think it looks like there's about to be something nice pushed now. Not nice. I mean, something big that's being pushed right now. And once that's pushed, we'll go ahead and I'll let Ryan jump in and kind of go through that. When it comes to Sarah Ransom, and she wasn't a was she actually a big part of the lawsuit, Giuffre versus Maxwell? Because it doesn't really seem like she's played a huge role in this entire thing until now.
Do any lawyers care to speak to that? As being not very legally technical, it's hard to assess what that question.
What? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Well, I was just trying to see if I haven't seen much at all from Sarah Ransom until today. So was she not a big part of this lawsuit from Virginia Giuffre versus Ghislaine Maxwell?
Be honest, I can't answer that question, but one observation I have is it seems that the information that's now coming out today from her has not been verified or validated to the extent that even some of the trashiest papers in the world would report on it. So that there's a great deal of question in my mind about her credibility.
Yeah,
Apparently, she gave a victim impact statement in connection with the Ghislaine Maxwell's sentencing for sex trafficking charges. So she might have been involved more in that case. I don't know, but she did give a statement there.
Yeah, Ryan, can you give a little context to the tweet
Which
that's
one?
now posted at the top?
Sure thing. So the one that's posted on top is Peter Mandelson, the former British cabinet member.
No. The one that was just now posted. I
Oh,
just
there we
pushed
go.
it
Okay,
to the top.
sorry. I'm getting a little bit of help today, which I'm very grateful for. So I didn't post this one. One of our team members actually just posted this one.
Ah.
So it says Epstein files. Victim says she was stalked. So there's claims that these victims were being stalked. So let me read through the quote. Sarah Ransom, is already fearful for her life and has been followed at least once since she had disclosed the abuse she endured at the hands of defendant and Epstein, defendant being Maxwell. Remember, a lot of these documents are from the Maxwell case, so a lot of the times when you hear defendant, that almost always will refer to Maxwell.
So who was mentioning
Once
something
again,
earlier?
Nick, just a little context. What's happened here is that Maxwell had asked for a copy of Sarah Ransom's current driver's license, and Ransom is saying that's not relevant. Plus, it's going to give people my address and information that they should not have, and so they will be able to track me down in inappropriate ways.
Got it. Oh no, we lost Johnny. I was going to add a question for Johnny, but Ian, I see you're unmuted. Do you want to jump in?
I was just gonna. I haven't heard anyone mention this yet, but it's worth noting that Sarah Ransom does have a book published on her alleged abuse that is for sale. I have not read it, but it's just an important note about both her credibility and about her incentives. And I'd be curious if anyone has read any of that book.
No hands for that one.
It is called Silenced No More, Surviving My Journey to Hell and Back by Sarah Ransom.
You know, I just find it odd that no matter who's been really covering this over the years, nobody has really given her a lot of air. Nobody, even up until now. She's kind of a new character that I don't know if there's something out there that, if anybody in the audience knows why, or if she was widely discredited for some things, if you want to throw it down there in the comment section and let me know, that'd be awesome, because I think it does beg the question as to what how big of an involvement did she actually have, and was there anything credible at all? I'm not really sure there.
I also
I don't want to just say this, but because I really don't know, but I somehow from reading the documents got the impression she was, and please, if she's not, I'm not saying this is just my opinion, Jane Doe 43.
I found the exact
seems
same
to be
thing.
the case.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, fine. I didn't. Yeah.
It's worth noting that I'm in no way intending to discredit Sarah Ransom here. It's just an important note as to discrepancies that Sarah Ransom was allegedly, her relationship and trafficking began at age 22 when she was trying to attend FIT, this university in New York. And that is a distinctly different pattern of abuse than a lot of the other victims that we've been talking about up till now that were their trafficking began when they were like 14, 15, 16, 17. And Sarah also has far more allegations of like weight loss requirements and things like that. So it just feels like a different pattern of abuse and control. And I'm trying to look into her background. My understanding is that she actually comes from kind of an important or wealthy family or lineage. So it's just curious. I'd be interested if anyone else has any other insights on that.
I'm sorry, guys. Quick question. You guys might be able to help me out with this. There's a person named in this thing that I'm about to post named Jen. Does anyone know who Jen is to kind of save me a little bit of time? Okay, I'm gonna take that as
A
a
lot
no.
of
So I'll go down.
unknowns here.
Yeah, I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole for a second before posting this. I just want to confirm it because this is a bigger allegation, but I think that I want to confirm it before I post it. It will go up eventually, but it's just I need like Nick, if you give me like 2 seconds of bandwidth, and then I will get this out to you guys.
Sure, sounds good. So, kind of recap for the audience here. I don't know, Ian, you've been here for a lot of the time. What are some of the biggest takeaways so far in the drop today, in your opinion?
The drop today is very different than the other drops. It's almost like the information is kind of compartmentalized and being dropped in segments of relevance to different parts of the case or something. As you've mentioned, Sarah Ransom is a big part of this drop. It's the first drop with photo and alleged video evidence. It's sort of the drops in previous days sort of all were repetitions of the same depositions, a lot of like kind of just repeated information that a lot of it was all the same as the first drop on the first day. And this drop feels significantly different in that there's new witnesses, there's new names, and there's new allegations that kind of take everyone in different directions. But it still obviously feels very unclear.
Okay, so I got the name. Jen is actually someone named Jennifer Arose, who's 14 years old at the time. So I'm gonna hit post on this, and I will read it to you guys. Just give me 2 seconds. Let me just put it in the nest. Okay, so this is a dialogue between two people, which unfortunately they're not named. I'm assuming it's more email dialogue, but it doesn't say who it is. So this is regarding again, I'm gonna rubber band this with like allegedly with what I'm reading, and it's not an accusation from me. So Epstein's victim allegation of Trump having sex with Jen, who is Jennifer Arose. She confided in me about her sexual friendship with Donald. Mr. Trump definitely seemed to have a thing for her, and she told me that he kept going on about how he liked her pert nipples. Donald liked flicking them and sucking her nipples until they were raw. One evening when we were showering together, she showed me her nipples. They looked incredibly painful as they were red and swollen. I remember wincing when I looked at them. I also know she had sexual relations with Trump at Jeffrey's New York mansion on regular occasions, as I once met with Jen for coffee just before she was going to meet with Trump and Epstein together at his mansion. So this is again a little bit more detailed about Trump allegedly with this girl named Jennifer Arroza.
Who was that in the conversation about Jennifer?
I don't know. It's not named. The top and bottom are snipped. So this is these exhibits. They sometimes they cut off. If you look at the screenshot, you'll see it picks up somewhere right above that. It says like exhibit 6 or 7. So I can't see it. Whenever we can get a hold of what it is, we try to always let you guys know where it's from or who it's from directly. But again, Doc, I'd love your thoughts on that one if you want to jump in.
There's no reason to lend it any credibility whatsoever, because there's no reason to believe this woman has credibility whatsoever. The fact that she was willing to state it in a legal proceeding, I assume it was a deposition. People lie in depositions all the time. So again, I'll just go back to the reflection that all the allegations, I'll say all with quotes around it, that have been made previously about Trump that would have exposed him to any sort of legal jeopardy have never been proven true, right? The indictments, the 4 indictments are collapsing around him. And we could talk about that if you wanted to, but that's off the topic. So it's titillating. I think it's might have been said to garner attention, to garner a settlement. I have no idea what motivated this, and there's absolutely no supporting evidence to believe that her accusations are true.
I just picked up another article about Sarah Ransom from the Daily Mail, published in June 2022, where she allegedly she claims that she attempted to commit suicide twice while in Epstein's control, so to speak.
And that was in a Daily Mail article in 2022. Is that what you said?
Yes,
referring to Sarah Ransom?
reported by the Daily Mail, and is clearly just like restating claims by Sarah Ransom. I don't see any like evidence to necessarily confirm or deny those claims.
So Sarah Ransom is Jane Doe 43 for the record, and the suicide attempt is also is in this document as well.
Got it. Yeah. So I know we spoke a little bit earlier about Trump and possibly cooperating with authorities and such, and I think Tira said that there was no record of that. Vision, who I brought up on stage.
There was no record that was said that he was the person who went to the police about Jeffrey Epstein. I've sent to you the police report. He is never mentioned, and it happened before Jeffrey Epstein lost his privileges at Mar-a-Lago. Okay, so in fact, I think we heard on this stage 2 days ago that there is even some dispute about whether Trump threw out Epstein because of the allegations of sex with minors or something relating to a business transaction, but I don't have any facts on that.
Vision, was there something I wanted to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing me up, Nick. So it's been out there for a while that an FBI agent by the name of Bradley Edwards specifically told the public that Trump did help with this. I tried to look for it on Google, couldn't find it, so I just went to Grok. I'll read you what Grok said upon asking if Trump had any assistance with the Epstein, with getting Epstein arrested or anything. Grok said Trump played a significant role in assisting the FBI in taking down Epstein in 2009. Trump was a federal informant on the Jeffrey Epstein case and was the only one who cooperated with authorities, according to Florida prosecutor Bradley Edwards. Trump's involvement led to the indictment.
True.
And Epstein. Can I finish?
First of all, there's one. You said 2009.
Stop interrupting, Tira. Stop protecting the pedophiles, Tira.
Stop. He said 2009. That's clearly wrong.
Can I finish reading? Can I finish reading? And then you guys can chop it up.
But that's not the quote. But it's clearly not the quote. I can tell you where people can find it right now if you'd like.
Can I finish reading?
Yeah. Vision, go ahead and finish, and then I'll let people go. Okay. Just go. Yeah, go ahead and finish.
So Bradley Edwards. If you guys want to find out about this, you want to look up Bradley Edwards because he was the actual Florida prosecutor, and there's actual video of him actually saying this on top of what Grok was able to pull up. So Trump's involvement led to the indictment, and Epstein was arrested again under the Trump administration. In 2016, Trump spoke to the FBI about Epstein, and there's an interview about it. In fact, Trump was the only. Can I finish speaking? My God, just give it a minute, man. In 2016, Trump spoke to the FBI about Epstein, and there's an interview about it. In fact, Trump was the only elite person in the world that helped the FBI during the Epstein first takedown. When Trump found out about Epstein's activities, he banned him from his club and helped the FBI with information that led to Epstein's arrest. In 2017, Trump's company, now this is something that maybe you guys would like because Grok gave multiple information. It said in 2017, Trump's company denied that Epstein had been a member of Mar-a-Lago, but a Trump organization official later confirmed that he had been a member. Despite this, Trump had a falling out with Epstein and had not spoken to him for up to 15 years before his arrest. Overall, Trump's role in helping the FBI take down Epstein was crucial. He was the only one amongst the rich and famous who knew Epstein to cooperate with authorities and provide information that led to his arrest. It's also in the comment section if you guys want to take a look at it.
All right, so Jason, you can bite. You get unmute, bottom left-hand corner. Maybe.
So
Okay,
two points, just 2 points. Number one, first of all, Bradley Edwards was an attorney for some of the victims. He wasn't an FBI agent himself. Secondly, he said Trump helped take him down in 2009. Well, in 2007, Epstein was found guilty, and that was when the infamous non-prosecution agreement happened. So I don't know actually what Trump could have done in 2009 that was particularly relevant, because Jeffrey Epstein had already, I think, served his sentence by then, or was in the process of serving his first sentence.
Can I just?
Someone's lying. It's either
He was a
Grok
Florida
or Tira.
prosecutor. Bradley was a Florida prosecutor. I misspoke.
Can
Not an
I?
FBI
Can I?
agent,
He was a
a Florida
lawyer. He was a
prosecutor.
lawyer for the victims. Go read.
In 2009, he was a Florida prosecutor.
Can I just say my own work on Bradley Edwards and researching his involvement in the case is getting on board with Virginia Giuffre in 2014, and then after that being co-opted by what seemed like a CIA operation, and admitting in his book Relentless Pursuit over and over again that he felt like John Stanley Pottinger is the person that, even though he had all of these concerns, he still went into a law firm with, was the CIA, was Stan the Man, was 007 in his own pocket. That's what he felt, and so he was co-opted by the CIA in 2014, and he admits it in his book. So it's hard to believe anything he says when the Central Intelligence Agency have been all over it.
Yeah, Doc, did you want to add something there? Or?
No, I just think debating with Grok is not going to establish anything on this platform. I know what I read. I believe James Patterson to be entirely credible. No one in the years that since that's been published, or the Netflix documentary based on that book, have ever been attacked credibly by Tira or anybody else.
Doc, have you looked at the police report? You claimed that Trump reported
There's more
Epstein
than
to the
one
police.
police report.
Can you look
There's
at the
more than
initial
one police report.
You
There is
claim,
more than one police
fine,
report.
Doc, why don't you post the police report you were talking about? Because
I'm not
I have
interested in
sent mine.
disproving your
I have
lies,
sent
Tira. I've
mine
got
to
better
Nick and
things to
Ryan.
do.
Okay, so you don't have any backup. I sent mine to Nick and Ryan.
Why don't
Let's
you
leave it
talk
there.
about Hillary Clinton? Why don't you talk about Jeffrey Epstein? Why don't you talk about the people who are credibly accused? Why do you come up here and try and harangue about Trump? We know why. I know why.
No,
Why
I
don't you
actually
explain
have
it to
been
the
very
7,000 people in
measured.
the room?
I have been very measured, I believe, about Trump and what these documents say
In your
or
opinion,
don't
not
say.
me.
But all that I'm pushed back against was that Donald Trump somehow reported Epstein to the police and was instrumental in
He
getting him arrested.
absolutely did.
That
It's been
is,
multiple sources have
once
recorded
again,
it, and you are not a reliable authority.
I have
period.
sent Nick and Ryan the
I
police
don't
report.
care.
You have
Go
submitted
ahead and do whatever
nothing.
you want.
If I could
Okay.
just jump in here, and by the way, Tira,
Go
I
ahead.
think you're doing good work. When we talk about Bradley Edwards, anybody can watch that interview. That's actually with Derek Bros, who I know has been on previous spaces, and a lot of the things that were read are conflated to what he actually said. He absolutely said that he contacted Trump, and Trump was the only person of any kind of stature to contact him back and give him valuable information. But you also have to remember that the Bradley Edwards case was a civil case that literally got settled the day before they were about to pick the jury. This is prior to Epstein's actual arrest and then imprisonment. And they gave a very, very long press conference after the fact with literally, I would say, tens of thousands of documents, if not hundreds of thousands of pages in front of them. So I always encourage people to go to the source material, and you can watch not only that press conference, but Derek Bros, I would imagine somewhere on his X page has his interview reposted, so you can hear it straight from Bradley Edwards' mouth.
So guys, I just had another post go up. So we don't just search the documents, we search all of the internet to find revelations that have happened since the events happened. So actually one of the girls, global girl, who's also known as real name Nadia Markinoko, was one of the girls that Epstein referred to as a sex slave, has been missing since the Epstein documents have been released. Now, mind you, she did plead the fifth 42 times in her deposition, but she has gone missing since these documents came out on the 3rd. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know if she went to hiding,
I think she's a
hopefully nothing worse
pilot.
happened, but
I think she's a pilot. She changed her last name, and it's going to be really hard to find someone who flies around the world. my opinion. I just want to just quickly add in, just sorry to interrupt there. Patterson also wrote a book with Bill Clinton, and he's also very close friends with him. So he does have a dog in this fight.
Although it would seem to me imply that his dog would be on the opposite side of the claims that have been made about the Trump situation.
No one's on the opposite side of
Thank you.
intelligence. So I think that there's an intelligence web that goes across both sides.
Very well said, Johnny. And it's worth noting, while we're on that topic, that there have been a number of authors that write books about agents and spies and what have you that have ties to intelligence.
Indeed. Someone who I think is very interesting for the Americans in the audience, especially, a man called George Huntington Hartford II, who was the AMP grocery chain heir in the US. Bears amazing. He existed 60 years before, but he bears amazing resemblance to Jeffrey Epstein. Had a little island resort where he liked prime girls between the ages of 14 and 18. It was called Paradise Island. He renamed it. Had a P as a flag. Everybody knew what he was up to. All of his friends were intelligence. In actual fact, his brother-in-law helped create James Bond himself. Ivor Bryce was actually the brother-in-law married George Huntington Hartford II's sister, and they lived in a nearby island. I can't remember if that island was called Goldeneye, but these people all swim in the same circles. They created the mythos behind intelligence, but in reality, a lot of them are just elites.
Hey, I just my legal guy just sent me. There's a FBI file that has been released on Epstein, and I'm posting it down in the blue pill snippets from it. There's a lot redacted, but this is pretty interesting. Reading through and seeing the timeline of what happened. I'm posting the different snippets from it, but I'll post where it came from next. But I'll keep putting those in there because it's a lot of newspapers from back when this all started hitting the news about Jeffrey. So
And
for
I
my
also
team,
let me say one thing about Nadia Marcinko. It's not like she's been missing for years. All they're saying is she hasn't been seen since last Thursday when the documents started to be released.
yeah. So according to one of our teammates that she just sent me, she said she was living in New York recently. She reiterated the pilot thing. Living in New York recently, and her neighbor, according to the New York Post, hasn't seen her in weeks. So we don't know if the article could have been maybe some clickbaity stuff, but her neighbor hasn't seen her in weeks. And by the way, just because you're a pilot doesn't mean you can just jump on a plane and disappear, unless you own the plane.
Kind of does, actually.
Really? You think Amelia Earharted it out of here? Like she's like she disappeared? Like,
no, pilots in the U.S. typically they're able to jump on their carrier and go wherever in the world they want to.
yeah, but she'd have to own the plane. I don't think Epstein was paying her that much that she was able to buy a
She
plane.
does teach for flying, so she does teach fly. She's an actual teaches pilots. She's that good at flying, so I'm sure she's probably made a bit of money. And like I say, she changed her last name slightly.
Let's hope she's safe. That's all.
I agree completely. Let's hope she's safe. Now, listen, she's got an extremely sad story. That is a girl who it seems like was brought from the East. She was a properly. It's as bare bones as it gets when you look at the Epstein victims. That is a girl who got smuggled from former Yugoslavia or wherever it was, and was sold to Epstein. He joked about that with someone, and she lived as a complete, what could be described as slave. I don't want to say the first word. I think I think everybody knows what it means. But she, from a very young age, was completely and utterly dominated by Jeffrey Epstein.
Absolutely. Chief Trumpster, welcome to the panel, man. I want to get your thoughts on what's going on.
Well, I think with the Epstein files, we're going to kind of see more and more of this trickle effect, and I think it's going to go a bit more to donor class people that are connected to the Clinton Foundation, possibly in other networks. Right now, it's kind of tough because you have so much information and trying to read through and comb through all the details of it. I think the more what I'm looking at least with Epstein is the connections to foreign governments and our own government, and seeing how they kind of tie in together. And it's one thing to have, it's one thing, I guess, for it to be just a domestic issue, but having it international and you're having it with governments and other kinds of parties, it's really like a sinister thing. And the connections with Mossad, for instance, with Epstein is the most challenging factor I've seen so far, in how that was a very clear-cut presence with Epstein, with who he associated with, and how there was very high-profile ministers went to Epstein's place as well. So that's kind of where I'm looking at. I think that if we get more and more files, we'll probably have more and more answers as to additional Israeli ministers or other people who may be connected, and other governments too, I'm sure. And that's just, of course, because he was owned by Intel, as was the reason why he got a sweetheart deal in, I think, 2006 or something like that, because he was linked to intelligence. And I think that we should always ask, like, what intelligence group was he linked to, and to keep digging for that.
I'd like to put in just that I've since I've talked on here, I've had a lot of what I kind of call Mossad absolutists, who want to believe that Epstein was only one thing. And I all of the people involved, including Robert Maxwell and other people, were never all of one thing. Intelligence is a web, it's international, it's multipolar, it's a really interesting web, and they know, they dance with each other, they're on the same sides, but they dance against each other too. We never know who's who, and that's the whole point of being a spy. That's when you're that level, everybody knows that you probably work for everybody. But Mossad, of course, I just want to ask one question to people who, as a thought process, he was probably 80-90% funded just by Les Wexner. And Les Wexner obviously is American, but with affiliations to the Mossad. Now, if you were intelligence in any country, you'd want to create that link if you were American intelligence, so that then you could say, if your guy gets caught, or the guy you're linked to gets caught, you could say he's foreign intelligence, and everybody would have all the evidence sitting there for you. So I think there's loads of ways to look at this, and we'll never get a clear-cut answer.
Got it. Yeah, so I'm waiting on somebody to connect, bring them up on stage right now. Oh, yeah, okay, there we go. Jesse, welcome to the stage. I don't know if this is your first time or not, but it's your first time with me co-hosting anyway. Yeah. I gotta start with the name here, man. You got Epstein plus WEF plus UN. So you have some opinions on this stuff, I'm assuming. I'll just let you start.
Yeah, I've got a lot of opinions. Basically, I'd rewind back to like 2020 when I first started looking into this thing. I realized that there was a lot more ties to Malthusianism and the World Economic Forum than I perceived as just trafficking and pedophilia. So, coming from a military background and seeing all these connections and finance background, I just started digging. And so, one of the things I think that people had been missing for a very long time is all of these incredibly scary military science related associations that Epstein had, starting with the mind-brain behavior program at Harvard, the co-founding of the program for evolutionary dynamics, which when I started reading through that, realized that it was based on the theory that Malthus's theory was fact, essentially the limits to growth concept that the Club of Rome promotes. And so when I realized that, it occurred to me that Epstein was also a Malthusian, like many of these other people. And so now that people are tracing Club of Rome and the origins of the World Economic Forum being based in that, the United Nations with Maurice Strong also being Club of Rome, and yes, a lot of this coming from Rockefeller, I started to realize that my main thesis now is that this was essentially a Manhattan Project 2.0. Instead of a nation versus nation chase for the atomic bomb, it was Epstein collecting these scientists and key policymakers that would be able to influence policy making for the World Economic Forum, UN, World Bank, and these scientists that he had been collecting very much in line up with Clinton's PTAC and OSTP, and then the NBIC, which is your biotechnological, cognitive and info sciences. And in essence, layman's speak, that would be, transhumanism. What people are starting to realize, this transhumanism movement is kind of a evolution from eugenics, and they also have Malthusian ideologies. So when you combine it with, again, all the other associations, there's a high correlation with environmentalists and again, Ted Turner's Club of Rome, Al Gore, Bill Gates, and there's a lot of associations, first or second degree with Epstein or Ghislaine. And then you go back to Robert Maxwell, who was funded by the Rothschilds, and he had attempted to get a $20 billion loan from Thatcher to save the USSR. And it's just, I don't know where to start and where to end when I do this, any of these stories, but I make ridiculously long threads, which I guess if I have the opportunity to kind of highlight, some of it right now, I think that would be important for people to hear. A lot of my followers have been, upset that I've kind of hammered against the Q operation, and talked about it as being Operation Trust 2.0. One of the things that got me down this path was seeing this quote unquote flight log or Epstein Island list, and it's been conveyed as many different things that was posted by the Q operation. And it was missing some very key names. These key names: Ira Magaziner, which was CEO of the Clinton Health Access Initiative; Melanie Walker, which was the brain surgeon that Epstein aided through med school and then later went on to work for the Gates Foundation and World Bank simultaneously, which she played roles in many different things, from finance, like for example, some of the ESG, SASB, which is your sustainable accounting, financial accounting standards board. So FASB is Financial Accounting Standards Board. That's what your corporate financial reporting is based in, and they're advancing SASB, which is Sustainable Accounting Standards Board. And so again, I start seeing all these ties with the environmentalism and health, and then you go look at Prince Charles pushing Terra Carta, which is based on health and environmentalism. That's what he talks about. And so going back to Melanie Walker being at World Bank and influencing policy there, where she previously was able to influence policy at World Health Organization in China, and the Gates Foundation, it made me realize there's a lot of connections here that people are missing. One of the other connections with Ira Magaziner, who was also on the flight log. So these people were on the flight logs that were missing from the Q operations, spreadsheet, whatever it was, that they had a list of very key names. Ira Magaziner, Melanie Walker, Eric Nonax, who focuses on global diseases, pandemics, and NGOs like the Clinton Foundation. Minsky was missing from that list, who was just named in this recent document for purported sexual activity with one of the accusers within the released court documents. So he was missing from it, and I've made lists of these. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to riff here, but they're in my Twitter threads. So anyway, this had given me a massive red flag that there is, health stuff involved with this, global health, and they have Malthusian ideology. Tracing it back to the program for evolutionary dynamics, and which is where the gene drive for Gates's mosquito depopulation plan came from. I began to look into Epstein's history with science, and he somehow was the trustee for Johnson & Johnson heiress's trust. She was on the flight logs. And when I say on the flight logs, I mean court documented FAA flight logs. FAA flight logs are legal documents. I'm a retired pilot. And they were also submitted to court. To my knowledge, nobody has attempted to refute what those represented. But the more alarming one I found was that Epstein in 1995 formed a two-person corporation called Ghislaine Corporation. And the only other person on that corporation was a woman by the name of Mandy Ellison. Mandy Ellison is married to Ralph Ellison, and Mandy and Ralph were in the Black Book as well as on the FAA court-documented flight logs. Ralph Ellison is an alarming name because he was the founder of Door Biopharma. Door Biopharma is now Sologenics, which does COVID or attempted a COVID vaccine, but additionally does dual use research of concern. So they were a biowarfare / biodefense company. That is the biggest alarming thing I found in all of this that made me realize that, okay, Epstein had a keen interest in dual use research. And when you go back to look at his webpage and the specific scientists that he had congregate on his island, you see that many of them are the top tier scientists in the entire world that conducted dual use research of concern. If you're unfamiliar with what that means, it's science, military science that can be used for good or bad. And you'll have to forgive me because a lot of this isn't my area of expertise. If I were to say where I felt I could really shine in all of this was that I have a finance background, an executive MBA with an emphasis on healthcare, and I'm a retired Army pilot, medevac. So these are the
So Jesse, if I could just jump in here and ask you a question.
Yes.
So you told us a lot of great information that I wasn't aware of. I knew about some of the connections because we were doing a lot of research with the team over the weekend. We didn't really get a day off. And what is the inference here? If we could boil it down to like in a sentence or two, what is the inference here? Are you saying that he had a hand in COVID and with a COVID vaccine? Because he was dead.
Let's establish that. So you guys talked about the relationship Anthony Blinken had with Sam Pizer, which was Robert Maxwell's right-hand man. Anthony Blinken is the one that appointed Gail Smith, former CIA or current CIA, can always are, and USAID, Gail Smith. Gail Smith was on Epstein's flight logs back in like 2002 in Ethiopia, which is where Tedros came from. Now, I don't know for sure if she recruited Tedros, but I found it alarming that this woman who ended up being in charge of Biden's COVAX, she was global vaccine coordinator. She was able to then approve funding, which then went to World Bank and Gavi. And so World Bank is where Melanie Walker was. That's Epstein's former scientist and Gates Foundation scientist and director, and World Bank, she answered directly to World Bank President Jim Kim. Jim Kim had previously signed a document forging a relationship with the Clinton Health Access Initiative when he was at the World Health Organization. The signee on that was Ira Magaziner, who was the CEO of the Clinton Foundation. He did this while he was flying around on Epstein's plane. He also, Ira Magaziner, also flew to Beijing with Epstein and Bill Clinton. And shortly after is when there was an announcement of a partnership between the Clinton Health Access Initiative and BioMaru, a lab in China, which I haven't found hard concrete fact, but supposedly BioMaru or Elaine Maru, the CEO of BioMaru, had funded some of the building of the Wuhan lab. That might be irrelevant. But what is relevant is BioMaru is where Moderna CEO Stephen Bancel came from. After he went to launch Moderna, he immediately got a DARPA contract. This is somebody that came from, where Clinton just got done signing this relationship.
So Jesse,
Yeah.
this is a lot to take in, and I'm sure that it's a lot for the audience as well. If you could give it to me like in a line or two, so that way I can like understand what you're telling me, like instead of, because like we're leapfrogging from person to person, and I'm losing track.
I'm saying that Epstein collected people in science and global health policy,
correct,
that were very much interrelated with everything that we're seeing roll out in the past 4 years.
Oh wow.
World Economic Forum, UN, World Health Organization, all of the policy making, a lot of the people involved with either the virus or the vaccine or the diagnostics, the forecasting models, there are a lot of pieces to this that Epstein had first or second degree associations with. And it is very apparent that these associations share a very common ideology, and that is based in Malthusianism.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Chief Trump's on to you.
Oh, that's Jesse. If he believes that, if almost like they're assets in a sense, and they kind of would have direct links to different governments, if the whether it be vaccine development or the whole narrative about the vaccine or COVID in general, do you think that, I guess, through Epstein's, I guess with all of his blackmail he had on people and the way he was involved with lots of different types of governments, is it possible that that could have been like a big thing where he was coordinating responses to COVID, or at least directing people to respond in a certain way at the direction of an agency in a sense?
If I could piggyback off that question, if you could include any Bill Gates connections in
Yeah.
there, 'cause that's what I've been very curious about. I'd appreciate that too.
Well, I'll start with Bill Gates' connection. So Melanie Walker and Boris Nikolic. Nikolic was the scientist that was named in Epstein's will. Melanie Walker, and Boris Nikolic both worked for the Gates Foundation. Nikolic, in 2019, presented to JP Morgan Particles for Humanity, which was a Gates Foundation, startup. And he presented vaccine tracking with nanoparticles and some kind of micro needle patch, things to be able to, basically that look like they would be taking advantage of something like a global pandemic and the response to it. Once, let's see. So once, I'm sorry, this is very hard to package.
Just while you're packaging that, can I just say, he mentioned, I don't want the name to be lost on anybody. Melanie Walker, that's such an important person. She comes up all of the time.
Melanie is the key person, I think, that the world has overlooked.
Yes, she is, and there's she seems like an amazing character. The rumors I've heard about her from early on seems like she was into it all. It's like, oh, this is brilliant. I'm right in the center of something, and I know what it is, and I'm going to be involved in it, and it's going to make me something. And she's got involved with some of the biggest people, and she is someone. If you untangle her her life, she's worked with loads of people who are extremely interesting.
One of so on her, she had involvement with Prince Andrew, and there's articles on that. She also had, or Andrew also had associations with Peter Nygaard. Well, the commonality there is when Melanie was working for the Gates Foundation, this appears. This is when the relationship was formed with BGI Genomics in China. That's a relationship that both Peter Nygaard and George Church shared in common. George Church is one of the scientists that Epstein worked with at Harvard under the evolution program for evolutionary dynamics, the human human genome project, personal genome project, and then mind brain behavior program. I believe he was also part of that. So he's a transhumanist, and so you look at, okay, so you have Melanie Walker, that's a brain surgeon that is associated with these people and appears, like I said, so a lot of this is hard for me to verify, but appears to have forged some of the partnerships with like BGI and the Gates Foundation. But she also, she previously came from University of Washington, where she was a professor. She was a blood clot doctor. She's running a blood clot bank. But I think also alarming is she played a role in IHME, which is the I forget the acronym, but it's health metrics, basically tracking. They tracked a lot of the COVID forecasting for the entire world. So she had her hands in that. And then she also had, before she went to the Gates Foundation, she worked for the China World Health Organization. So there's definitely involvement in tying the Gates Foundation, World Bank, a lot of this, Frankenscience, and she's also a World Economic Forum. She was a global shaper. Then she's currently, I don't know what she's listed as on the World Economic Forum, but you can go on there and see her profile. She wrote articles for the World Economic Forum in like 2016 about transforming healthcare. She wrote an article about microfinance. So she plays a role in finance. Again, it seems to me that she's doing a lot of the policy making in helping the World Economic Forum roll out what appears to be a China modeled governance using healthcare and environmentalism, which is coincidental that while she was working for China World Health Organization, she likely would have ran into a guy by the name of Ren Minghua. I don't know how to pronounce these people's name, but he is one of the leaders at the World Health Organization for China. He previously did some population, I don't want to say population control, but I think, that's what I perceive it as being, family planning in China, and worked with the Uyghurs.
Can I just add there, Jesse, that her World Economic Forum title, her part is the alumni of the Global Shapers community. But she is a very interesting lady. Everybody should look into her, and her connections are wide. Now, I always felt like she was the other lady in the Foxcoat House situation with Jeffrey Epstein and Nicole Youngkerman. There was a blonde on one arm and there was a brunette on the other, and I couldn't work out who the brunette was at all. But once I heard stories of Melanie Walker, she really filled in that as an image, but I was never able to prove it.
Did you guys also highlight, I didn't necessarily hear, and please confirm for me, that Melanie Walker seems to be a critical connection that brought Bill Gates into Jeffrey Epstein's networks through her future husband? Am I reading this correctly?
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, but I'm astounded by Melanie Walker. Everybody should know her, really.
So here's a question just to kind of build a little bit off of what Jesse was talking about. And Champagne Joshi, I will get to you right after this, but I know Bill Gates has been mentioned several times in the past couple of minutes here. But he's also, as far as I'm aware, not been mentioned in any sort of substantial capacity in any of the documents that we've seen so far. And apparently he's, some people say, some reports will say that don't know how substantiated they are, but that he's been to the island up to 26 times. He's been documented at, and this part is proven, at Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse in New York City. multiple times late into the night, but he hasn't been mentioned yet. Johnny, is that a surprise to you, or would you have expected him to be mentioned?
Sorry, I was a little bit off researching there. Who were you talking about?
Okay, well, I mean, the audience heard what I said, and you'll understand the context. Why hasn't Bill Gates been mentioned?
Oh, right, because this is much earlier, and I mean, Bill Gates was very careful. I could add loads of context to this. Bill Gates is a first-year World Economic Forum Global Leaders for Tomorrow type of guy. Well, get off then. Sorry, my dog's having to go at me.
I got so confused.
Yeah, no, it was my dog. So he's like been really important for this new kind of like post-Soviet era and the creation of that. And he started to run certain leadership courses as well when he got back from that leadership course and started investing in loads of different things. And that rolled out, but he kept underground. He kept, doing his stuff behind the scenes. As it goes on, we're going to find out that he will have had a very long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but that relationship, I think, fundamentally grew later on. As technology grew, their relationship grew equally exponentially, you could say.
Well, it looks like, some of the documented cases of Bill Gates meeting and being with Jeffrey Epstein at his townhouse, especially up there in New York City, between 2011 and 2013. So that's, in terms of the Epstein stuff, that seems to be fairly recent, no?
Yeah, so that's why you're not seeing them in the documents here, because most of these documents relate to early noughties, so around 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as soon as we get into the eventual documents in other court cases, where you'll see lots of Bill Gates connections.
And when we talk about Bill Gates, guys, I do want to point out that there is nothing, again, out there in the public other than the Epstein connection that would suggest pedophilia. However, we do have reports this year of one of his mistresses being a 20-year-old, I believe it was chess or something like that. She was a chess player, and she was met through Warren Buffett. But one of the technology guys, and he's more than a technology guy, that I don't think we've discussed here today, that has an association. This is a high-level guy, again, a Clinton connection, but also a Bush 1 connection, a Harvard connection, is Larry Summers. And the reason I bring him up in the context of technology is we've talked about Sergey Brin, we've talked about Peter Thiel, but Larry Summers recently has been put on the board of 3 over at OpenAI. So when we talk about this network, and we talk about it not only in academia, but in this field of technology, and yes, transhumanism, eugenics, OpenAI has one of the most substantial parts to play, if it's allowed to, by presenting certain narratives. And Larry Summers is another guy, in my opinion, that is not mentioned enough.
Who has no business being on the board of an AI company that has serious ethical concerns. Larry Summers was so involved in the 2008 collapse in so many ways. I appreciate you mentioning that.
Can I also just quickly throw in there the World Economic Forum Global Leaders for Tomorrow, another alumni there from the same year as Bill Gates, along with a load of others, including Richard Branson. Do you see a connection to the globalists here? That they share the same room, in the same table, the highest table, the creation of what they see as the global world order. The same people were the exact people hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein and who are coming up in all of these conversations we're having here.
Yeah, so Champagne Joshi, welcome to the stage. Sorry for keeping you waiting, but what you got for us?
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Cool. Yeah, my perspective on this is I kind of want to take more of like a broader historical context. I think was kind of like my aha moment whenever I started reading about something called the Promise Scandal that goes back a few decades. And I know that Johnny and Jason have done a lot of great work on this. It kind of turned me on to this years ago. And it involves this software. It's like a prosecutorial management software that essentially was stolen by the DOJ off of a former NSA employee. And what it allowed people to do is get into the prosecuting systems within different countries, and they would sell them to intelligence agencies. And this kind of all goes back to Robert Maxwell and Mossad. And I was just wanted to kind of throw that out there. I'm going to post something in the comments here. It's a documentary I actually posted a little while ago that I think will be a good starting point for people if they're interested in it. I just wanted to ask Johnny and Jason if they could maybe give us a broader context on that and talk about that a little bit more. I'm not, by no means an expert on it, but it was just kind of like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. They had a back door to this, and they were selling it all around the world. And if you had that power, just imagine what you could accomplish in order to get into government's, basically backdoor into all of their justice system to understand what's going on with any investigations that they're doing. It's an amazing story that really, I think, ties everything together, because I think that's kind of at the root of this, and like the octopus, as they call it, that is at the core of the corruption and these people that that we just you can't put your finger on it. But once you kind of see this, you know that there is an actual cabal that has accomplished something here that is unprecedented, and they still exist today.
Intelligence.
So if I go ahead, Johnny.
I was just quickly going to say intelligence works by data, swallowing up data. In the tech world, you get in between all of those data points and you have all of the power. And that's really what I think Promise was an example of at the start. And it's ever present now. Unit 8200, Ehud Barak, Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, Nicole Yankerman, all doing the same sort of thing, trying to get between you and the emergency services and rake data, because that's what they're really after. And that pays really well. So just to mention that as a final bit, that Maxwell's whole family work in this exact thing of selling certain tech and evangelizing to an extent tech that's needed for the future with certain people, so that they've always compromised systems. That's what this is all about, isn't it?
So let's talk about Promise and another software called Carnivore. Essentially, these softwares were the ones that were utilized in a pre-9/11 era to take away all of your Fourth Amendment rights. So they were already spying on every communication they could in a broad sense. And Promise was that intricate software where it was going into databases. Carnivore was identifying keywords on conversations, again, pre-9/11. Now, even before the Snowden revelations, we find out pre-9/11 that they're also using Norris Insight systems. And Norris Insight systems would basically have a room in AT&T or a large telecommunication company that siphoned off all the information. So it was another server room that went directly to the NSA. Now, Robert Maxwell's role in this Promise software is, when you look at his intelligence connections, not only with Israeli intelligence and British intelligence, it seems like he was selling it on the black market, and other nation states and agencies were then getting this software, like Jesse had talked about, that was able to get in and infiltrate all these database systems. Now, let's fast forward to modern day. We talked about Peter Thiel, and again, this is a guy that's had great power, not only with creating PayPal, investments in Facebook, but Palantir is the premier privatized, I would say, spy agency that works with the Five Eyes network that goes beyond nation states. And once again, Peter Thiel is said to have had meetings marked down with Epstein in 2014.
So we just posted something on the page. I'm putting it in the nest right now.
I just want to say, I just saw the third headline with Sarah Ranson within 10 minutes. And, so once again, I think we need to ask why are they even dropping these names now? We are getting closer to the 24 election. We have seen all sorts of election interference, and suddenly within 10 minutes, there's the third headline with her, a person who has been contacting strange media like Russian media, you mentioned that before, and is writing a book to make money from, and now she's suddenly implying everything with Donald Trump, who has never been some kind of a prime suspect in this very old case. So, suddenly it's just all over the place with him, and it's very, very suspicious. So why are they dropping these names now?
So I have something interesting
Because,
coming for you.
okay.
So I have something interesting coming for you guys. So let me read this part, and then I have something coming right back to back on this one, right in like 5 minutes maximum. So there's allegations of Epstein's victims having had sex with Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Richard Branson on tape. When my friend had sexual intercourse with Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Richard Branson, tapes were in fact filmed on each separate occasion by Jeffrey. Thank God she managed to get a hold of some of the footage of the film tapes, which clearly identify the faces of Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Branson having intercourse with her. Frustratingly enough, though, Epstein was not seen in the footage, but he was clever like that. So apparently there's footage of this. And then I have one more coming up back to this. So if you guys want to discuss this, but Dr. Anna, I do agree with you. The timing of this is quite interesting.
No, well, wait.
Tara, go ahead.
We've been getting releases from various court documents since 2020. Okay, this is court management. Basically, what happened is when Ghislaine Maxwell's defamation case, when Virginia Giuffre's defamation case was settled, the court basically started to release some documents. This is there have been many filings. Go back and look. You'll see for 3-4 years. I really think trying to sort of say this is the judge interfering or someone interfering is a little, well, frankly, that's a suspect claim, okay, because there's literally no evidence of that. Go and look, read all the documents going back to, I think it's 2019 on the court listener file, and you'll just see there was a lot of back and forth about this, and this is when things started to come out in this most recent drop, but there have been other drops.
Tira, could I ask you as a lawyer a clarification question that I asked earlier?
Sure.
Who's in charge of the release timing of such documents? Is it the judge themselves? Is it the lawyers? Who's in charge?
So here's what happened. There was a lot of back and forth in terms of what the judge initially had asked. Is anybody claiming privilege? Is anybody claiming that they'll be harmed by these things? That went on and on and on, right? And so there were various parties who intervened to say, you can't release my name, et cetera, right? The judge then on December 18th came up with a list of documents that were unsealable. And at that point, there are only like 2 people who actually are still basically out there saying, no, you can't release anything relating to my name. Now, as to the rolling nature of this particular stuff, it's coming out Thursday, Friday, Monday, whatever. What the judge said was it'll be unsealed, and the parties, the 2 parties, so that are the lawyers in essence, I believe, for Giuffre and Maxwell, will make a determination about whether things are, the timing. Now, honestly, nobody really can answer this unless you're sitting in the court, but I would suspect this is more a question of docket management, because you have to go through all these things when you post them. So court clerk would have to look at these things to make sure that the formatting's okay, et cetera. And as we can see, there are tons of documents. So I think they just sort of said, okay, this batch comes now. Court clerks go through everything, make sure it's all appropriate, and then release it, et cetera. I think that's how, but I can't answer specifically why one document comes out today and one tomorrow.
So I'm about to post something, but Nick, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna let Jesse jump in.
So I don't know if this has been discussed, but you guys, everybody knows that David Bowie's Virginia's attorney. He is on the Council of Foreign Relations, and Epstein was on the Council of Foreign Relations for 15 years, or roughly 15 years. Bowie's also represented Harvey Weinstein and hired Black Cube, an Israeli Mossad agency, to intimidate the victims of Harvey Weinstein. Virginia also named Al Gore on the island, yet Bowie's had previously represented Al Gore versus Bush. Another really odd anomaly is that Bowie's was on the board of trustees for Theranos with Henry Kissinger. So the implication here is it's hard to describe what this could possibly mean, but your mind should definitely wander with everything else I had said. And well, I guess I'll leave it at that.
So wait, so your implication is that David Boies, who's one of the most well-respected lawyers in the country, was Cravath, I think, or Sullivan for many, many years, went off on his own, did the Trump-Gore case, the Bush-Gore case, which he lost, by the way, at Supreme Court, right? And has been involved with tons of litigation. Somehow he's what he's basically covering up some things but letting out other things.
I can
I
answer
think that's
this. I can answer this. I
yeah.
go back to Drexel Burnham Lambert and the collapse of one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in the world. And who's in charge of sorting out that? Well, it's the younger David Bowie who's getting involved in his big case for the first time. But it was really a cleanup job for the government, who were they were like, I think it was like 60% invested in the scheme, which collapsed. Then when they needed someone to go up against Bill Gates, who was intertwined with not only intelligence, but actors like this and the state in loads of different ways against the Microsoft antitrust suit, they chose David Bowie to do that too. And they lost, and they won. And that bit made him a big hero. That kind of founded his name. Now, I always see those moments, that early part of people's career when they do this sort of thing, that's when they gain their name. The thing he did afterwards, what was mentioned with Theranos there, is extremely interesting. He undermined that entire case. The lady was going to be prosecuted. The company was in trouble. No one on the board had any medical or scientific knowledge. And they were all on the board of this medical science company that was offering to do tests at an extremely fast speed that could not do that at all. And then they were lying about the results and the implications. That is terrible. So Bowie's got hired to represent them. And then to undermine the case himself, he joined the board alongside Henry Kissinger. So that story is really important to understand who Bowie's is. Now, when Edwards went to meet Bowie and Stanley Pottinger for the first time to see if he wanted to work with them on the Epstein case itself, and I think that's in 2014. He goes to their building. Bradley Edwards decides he wants to buy a tape recorder beforehand, a mini tape recorder, so he can record the conversation because he's sure he's going into an intelligence meeting. They're located in the same building as Jeffrey Epstein's main lawyer, Darren Indyke. It all seems suspicious. They go up. He decides there and then that Stanley Pottinger is definitely the CIA and David Bowie's is something else. David Bowie's was on the letter pad, he recalls, when they go through the evidence. It was in Epstein's house. When the FBI raided it, they found David Bowie's "Can you please call me back" written on one of the post-it notes. So there's a lot of connections, and that's like 2005. So there's a lot of connections with Bowie's covering up bad jobs by intelligence, and that's what he seems to be. And they have to make their name at the start. So what you're saying is right, Tara. I don't mean to I'm not attacking you with this. I'm saying the beginning for me, it looks like he's been given the cases to make his name, and then came the political stuff nearly straight away. Like I think it was the Microsoft Trust case first, and then the hanging Chad's case, which they lose. So they're on the losing side of that. And that was like controlled demolition, it looks like. And then the rest of his career, he's made lots of money. That man is one of the most lucrative lawyers in the entirety of America. Extremely interesting, some of his interactions. And I did make a note earlier of him and Pottinger rubbing their hands together with glee as they're introducing two journalists to a guy who's going to try and pretend that he's got sex compromise of Jeffrey Epstein and sell it to the press somehow through them. And they're planning to take massive cuts and use it as compromise. So that has to be factored in. His behavior was awful.
I just want to push back just a little bit, Johnny, because I know many people who know him, and he's a very good lawyer. He was at Cravath. He was involved with many notable cases. He left Cravath in 1997 because he wanted to go out on his own. He was given the Bush v. Gore. And if he's based, and Theranos was terrible, yes, but of course she is now in jail and she was prosecuted. That was a complete misjudgment for everyone on the board. So I guess what I'm saying is it seems to me he's been on both sides of lots of things. I'm not sure what you're saying. He represented, I believe, the Epstein victims for free, if I'm correct about that. So what exactly, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? You're basically sort of saying, oh, he's been involved in a lot of these things,
would do. Intelligence would come in and say, I need to manage this case. So, hey, how about I do it free? And I do it with my main man, Stan with the Winston Wolf, the CIA guy who's been working for the CIA, and they even themselves know who he is. I mean, that's what, at the time that Bradley Edwards meets them, Stanley Pottinger isn't noted down working with David Bowie's. No, he's some sort of other entity that David Bowie's uses. And David Bowie is an extremely powerful man, and with power comes corruption. That is natural order of things, and unfortunately we've seen that behavior in some of what David Bowie does. And you may know him personally, and he may be a very nice guy, but he also lives in a completely different realm to what I live in. And when I look at the evidence, I find him distasteful.
And it's important to note that lawyers are one of the most sought after career fields for this type of work by intelligence agencies. And to re-highlight the fact that Bowie's hired the Israeli private intelligence company Black Cube to spy on the alleged victims of Weinstein, we are talking about alleged Israeli ties when we talk about Jeffrey Epstein. And so the fact that a lawyer like Bowie's would use an Israeli and private intelligence company to spy on Weinstein victims is pretty damning in the sense of all the connections we're talking about here.
Doc.
Can I just clarify that I did not say I knew David Boies? I said I knew people who knew him. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just curious if in light of everything that we've learned in the last, I'll say, week about this global pedophile, I'll call it a conspiracy. I'll take note that I believe it was the Washington Post reported a few days ago that several, I'll call them brothels, which were used to compromise in a honeypot way politicians and others in Washington, D.C. That arrest of those investigation was recently announced. Does this give anyone pause reviewing back the Pizzagate situation, the Comet Pizza, the accusations there? Shouldn't those accusations and those rumors be reevaluated in light of what we're seeing now? Or can we just call that a complete lie that it was labeled by the media and the left back in 2019, 2020?
I'd just like to say, if we're going to talk about pedogate, that we have to talk about the real stuff, because there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So I think you have to tread lightly. I think there's obvious emails, the Lozado email, which I've highlighted many times, with Podesta and his friends on a farm where children are named by age 7, 9, 11 to be Ubered for entertainment in a heated pool. Yeah, that's troubling. When you talk about Alephantis himself, the fact that his Instagram had the avatar of the Greek god of man-boy love or pedophilia, Antinous, on it. Yes, that's troubling. There are many, many troubling things there that you could point to, but when you're pointing to DC power and pedophilia, you don't have to point that far. You know, Dennis Hassard at the time was the longest serving Speaker of the House, and this is somebody who never served any time for molesting any children, yet was labeled years ago by a judge as a serial child molester who began well before his career in politics, but in fact in schools as a gym teacher and wrestling coach. You go back even further than that, into the 80s and 90s, and you can look at not only the Franklin scandal, but Barney Frank in particular, who was running a call boy ring, or alleged to have, through his assistant, Frank Joby, who he had hired for $20,000. And that went all the way to the Chevy Chase Middle School in the area with the vice principal. This is all on the record. There were ethics hearings on Frank himself. You can still watch those over at C-SPAN. So I think that when we're talking about political power and these compromised individuals, we have plenty of public examples. However, just like in the case of Hassard, we don't have many accountable convictions. So Dennis Hassard did get convicted of essentially fooling the IRS and then lying to them. It was that how they found this. He was making payments to one of his victims, and the IRS began asking him about it. He lied. The victim told the truth. And I think Hassard got sentenced to 15 months, I think 13 of which he actually served.
Speaking of the victims, Jason, if I could just jump in real quick about something we posted. I didn't want to jump in on the back and forth, but I just want to inject this and go back to reading the doc. So the tapes never existed, according to Ransom, who later recanted her claim. In 2019, New Yorker article, Ransom admitted that she had, quote, invented the tapes to draw attention to Epstein's behavior and to make him believe that she had evidence that would come out if he harmed her. So that was her essentially recanting about the tapes that were mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. And I think that also has to be discussed. This is a dark world. There are implications in these documents that Epstein would interview girls after their encounters with these powerful individuals. And think about that for a second. Basically, Epstein wouldn't necessarily have to have tapes of them compromised with that individual. He would know what had happened, and then he would describe that to them and maybe show them a video of something else. This would also put him in a position of power. But just going back to the DC rings, et cetera, this latest case, I think that this is not only something that has to be explored, but if we really want it explored to the level where we can start taking it down, we have to have criminal prosecutions and accountability. And that's why, again, I focused away from some fictitious list. And I think that we need to continue to put pressure on the available evidence that they know that we know they have in their possession of the burn disks, of the hard drives, of the photographs that they've discussed. And unless we get that, really, I'm not sure exactly where this is going to lead.
Can I just really quickly circle on what Doc said about Pizzagate? That I just shared a post to the top, that explores how the initial quote debunk of Pizzagate was based on a lot of very circular logic in mainstream reporting, and really it was never actually very well addressed by anyone doing any investigative research, and it was kind of an open question mark in the first place. And I think it's important to note that there's a huge difference between mainstream media saying something is debunked and actually showing evidence that something is debunked. So don't be fooled by the title of that video. There was never really a strong debunk on that, and it is 100. I mean, human trafficking networks are all tied together. The criminal networks, from gun running to drugs to human trafficking, they all know each other and they all work together. And it's not an isolated case. Jeffrey Epstein is not an isolated event. He's just one actor of many, and I can't help but imagine that all the other human traffickers that are out there probably think of him as that dickhead that got caught.
And by the way, Jesse, I want to point to the gun running you just said. People have to realize that Prince Andrew, aside from the in with the royal family and other individuals, was their largest arms dealer. People can look up the arms deal he facilitated with Goldman Sachs, and Gaddafi's son got a $1.3 million kickback on that. And, earlier we were talking about the Israeli aspects of this. I want to point out that when Vicky Ward talked about Epstein being intelligence, she talked about his relationship to Adnan Khashoggi. And Khashoggi was heavily implicated in Iran-Contra, but denied his involvement, and again, never brought to justice. And I would point to Iran-Contra as one of these multi-state international intelligence operations where, yes, we did have some accountability. Probably the last time in this country we had criminal accountability, but we far from got to the core of that issue. And the poster boy that they put out there was Oliver North, who would get radio shows, television appearances, and book deals to the tunes of millions of dollars. That sounds like a payday and not a punishment for being involved in that type of thing.
I see a direct link as well. What Jason just said there about Iran-Contra, I can tell you a direct link. I can tell you John Stanley Pottinger was involved with George H.W. Bush and a guy called Eugene Proper when the assassination of Orlando Letelier happened outside the Chilean embassy in Washington, D.C. in 1976. They got together in a room in CIA headquarters, and George H.W. Bush looked, and the guys looked at Operation Condor, saw this brilliant multifaceted, multinational operation that allowed them to, spread the blame around the place and make it really hard to pinpoint where the operation was coming from and take any sort of action legally. Just after that is it's not long before these Republican men, including John Stanley Pottinger, are working on the campaign for George H.W. Bush to get in the White House. That all tied up with Iran-Contra, the October surprise. And in that, all of these different people are working together. So, Jeffrey Epstein's working with Adnan Khashoggi, working with Cyrus Hashem, he's working with John Stanley Pottinger, all together in this mold. And that was, I think, they were seeing how good this sort of multifaceted operation that was multipolar, how successful it was going to be. And like with finance in the 80s, everything went hog wild.
I'll say quick about the Trump comment, because I saw that article as well, and this goes just to the way that things are reported in breaking stories, and even just the dark nature of this entire tale. There's lots of misinformation and lots of different things that could be true, could be false in this story, and pretty much most most stories when they come through and they're breaking stories. I would say with the Trump one, there was, as you said before correctly, there was a recanting of the claim in 2019. So with that being said, we'll see what happens with more of the files. But I would say that, even just looking at what we see with these files, to understand that this is, again, a lot of stuff you hear about is true. Most of it is, but some things are obviously not going to be true, or not exactly too solid on the facts. So that's why I caution with most of, like, you see a name or something like that. But if you have multiple instances of it, you have clear, connecting documents or records of it, that's another story. That's where I wanted to just make a point about that.
Absolutely. But one thing I want to say is, just to kind of like blanket this, is that we're not trying to discredit any of the victims here, because obviously disgusting things happened on that island. It's just that when things are discussed, we're just throwing the allegedly wrapper around it, because again, we don't know until stuff comes out, and then we can verify it. That's all. I just don't want anyone to take it as if we're trying to discredit anyone here. That's not our position. We're just finding and sharing and discussing together as a group. Eugene, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at this going, all the connections at the top level of several governments that were compromised. Like, my biggest fear of a government official is that they're blackmailed and making decisions not on behalf of my country, right? And I got to say, so one of my things with the whole Q thing was all the conspiracies that never panned out, right? And that Pizzagate, like, I'm not going to say one way or the other, but apparently it didn't pan out. But now we're finding out where there was actually reason for the smoke, right? If any of these documents are indications of involvement or guilt, um, I I I think it's really important that somebody said it earlier, that we stick to the facts of this. And that word alleged is a good word, right? And I want to say that all of this is my opinion only. For me, as a Native American, I don't really pay attention to other countries and what's going on, but the stuff I keep hearing is really disturbing to me, to be honest, right? Like, these are people from various countries that are on the upper echelon of those countries that control the decisions made by that country. And you can't tell me that our intelligence, which I know, would not know that this stuff is going on. You can't tell me that. And so when it comes to, like, how do we fix this in our country? Like, they need to release shit. Like, whether, excuse my language, but they need to release whether they have names, connections, like all of that, because this is going to rip at least our country apart by everybody making accusations based on uh, uh, suppositions in these documents, right? This is all testimony that has never been proven
Is
in
Eugene
in
rubber banding
court.
for anybody else or just me?
No, I think it's just you, Nick.
And Eugene, what you said right there is all of it right there. They won't release it, in my opinion. They can't, because there's so many tentacles throughout all of corporations, the government, um, all throughout society, that if they did, it would actually threaten national security. That it could tumble all these institutions. So it's going to be very tough for them to get to the point to release anything of consequence, in my opinion. Even though obviously we want to know what really happened, but I just think that we are so compromised at the core of our institutions, society wide, pretty much worldwide, that we're never really going to get to the truth as far as a smoking gun, or they might throw out some sacrificial lambs there, but I don't think they would allow it to happen, just because of the implications of it and the scale of it.
And the way that I'll say real quick, the way that governments work, it's like they put stuff out, or they give stuff to the people that will satisfy them, and keep the real issues or real problems concealed. Like, they're putting stuff out there that they're okay putting out, but I'm guaranteeing there's a lot more detailed communications within the intel agencies between Epstein and other associates of his. And it's pretty clear what we're seeing right now. It's, of course, very important and very important to discuss and talk about and, show what happened there. But I'm guaranteeing the majority of stuff about Epstein is not being talked about, whether it be his connection to our own government and possibly other governments, across the world, and how he served, whether it be in Israel or United Kingdom or a variety of other governments, and how he served at their disposal for their own agenda or their intelligence to benefit other countries, right? So that's a big point. Like, what is, as I said before, what's not being talked about, what's being hidden from us by agencies to cover that they allow this whole entire operation to go on and hurt so many people.
This kind of goes back to what we were talking about, Bowie's, the lawyer, is that we would all be so naive to think that there is not a massive campaign trying to control these releases and control this case from the very beginning. We're talking about the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, the most powerful sovereign individuals in the world. There are billions of dollars worth of disruption campaigns being run to try to not necessarily shut down these investigations and these releases, because obviously they have to be tactful, but to certainly control it start to finish, whether it be lawyers, whether it be judges if they can, whether it be media, you name it.
So how do we the people, like, this has got, like, in my opinion, like, our country's broken if this is left in place, right? We have compromised leaders, and potential leaders. Like, there, in my book, you were sitting next to this guy, you're compromised. I don't care who you were. Like, I'm an independent man. Like, I don't give a shit about parties. I tend to, as a Native American, we tend to vote more, lean more Democrat. But the fact is the truth, and you can't skirt the truth. I don't care who you are around me. And what I am seeing here is we have a bunch of compromised people in our country, including money people, which really bothers me, because the fact is we live in a country where, like, how much you raise is gonna, like, be a big factor in if you're elected or not, right? And I don't want pedophiles backing anybody. I don't trust them.
Eugene, as a
And
native,
that's
as a Native American, you know the Pine Ridge Reservation, yeah, and you know the standoff at Wounded Knee, and you know the history, and
absolutely,
and so you know that all of these guys on all sides, there's no difference. They're all Dick Wilson. You know, they're all of the same character. And when that happened, for people who don't know, the standoff at Wounded Knee was basically an out of control leader on the Pine Ridge Reservation called Richard Wilson, who was known as Dick Wilson. He was a horrible man, savage, completely terrible. Eventually, the American Indian movement stormed in with some of the greatest of the leaders of the time. It was their peak. It was an amazing time, and it began a protest that led to a blockade by the FBI and other authorities. And I tell you, the people who were involved in that include people essentially involved in making sure that they harassed the Native American people and worked alongside Richard Wilson, the corrupt governor, included John Stanley Pottinger, who headed up that actual response alongside another man. I can't quite remember his name now. Kent Frizzell led it, and then and then John Stanley Pottinger afterwards decided how it was going to unfold. And then we all know what happened afterwards, don't we? Harassment through the courts, loads of cases that fell apart, indictments that fall apart, and it was just about people, loads of people murdered on the reservation. It was all the same corruption. There was no difference between the American state and tribal leaders like Richard Wilson.
Well, so part of this, I'm glad you brought that up, because part of this is, within us, they had us pointing fingers at each other because they wouldn't release information. We didn't know, from tribe to tribe, we didn't know what was going on. It was only because several, like, were very good at infiltrating that we got to understand what was going on. But I see the same thing happening here. Is we have government holding on to stuff that has this entire country pointing fingers at each other that you're a dirty pedophile. One of the worst things you can be called on this planet, in my opinion. And to me, I don't care who's at the top of the government. I don't care who's hiding this. It is tearing apart our country, and that's where my concern comes in. Is I watch the same thing on a personal level. What happened to us out on the tribes is happening in our federal government, and I'm seeing it real clear. I'm sure it's happened before, and I'm sure there's other cases, but this right here has got me a little bit freaked out in that when you have compromised government officials and other countries have that information, you're not making a decision for my country. You just can't. You can't.
And that really brings a question to, how people are labeled or called conspiracy theorists for asking lots of questions and, seeing a couple documents or, seeing some video and then saying, well, this is suspicious. And you look into this whole rabbit hole and you figure things out about what our government's doing that aren't really serving your country's best interests or your own civilians' best interests or really anyone's interests at all. And it's not just with this Epstein story, but it's a variety of other things that have been labeled conspiracy theories for years and years and years. And when the truth comes out, whether it be in a couple of weeks or a month or a year or 10 years, and then those conspiracies are indeed proven true. And it really concerns, it shows like how our confidence in our government and our intelligence apparatus is really just been falling, rightfully so, because of all the shady stuff they've been doing for years and years. And this
Well,
is
we know that Hunter Biden is compromised. We know that he's been with China.
Yeah.
We've seen the photographs. That certainly compromises Joe Biden, and everyone seems to ignore that. And the left is like, oh, Joe Biden's going to be the president again. I support Joe Biden. You people really need to think about what you're saying in these recorded spaces, because I'm keeping track.
And I'll say this too. I mean, you can go through like every thing. Remember the whole conspiracy about the government spying on us and NSA, and then someone came out, and then that was true, and it's like, oh well, the conspiracies were correct. I mean, you can go through like pretty much a ton of these, conspiracies, especially in modern times. Forget even like the past times and past conspiracies. Just in modern times, there's been so many conspiracies that have been proven to be true because of the access we have to information online and the ability we have to record things and use our social and phone and social media and all of that. So the whole Hunter Biden thing is a humongous one too. We're called crazy, and the Russian conspiracy theory and Russian agents and all that from 50 or so NSA or 50 or so CIA and intelligence people. And it turns out it was just a complete lie, right? It was a complete lie, fabricated. I'm not trying to sidetrack Hunter Biden or anything, but it's important just to point out how the intelligence agencies have a history of lying to us over the past decades and are not really reliable in any sense. And it's a very accurate or fair position to not trust the intelligence agencies because they have a very long history of lying and being caught, just not telling the truth to us at all. And that's the whole example.
The whole point of the intelligence agency is to lie to us. They're all spies. That's what they do. That's the whole entire point of their existence, to subterfuge and just lie and create different avenues to go down rabbit holes that are dead ends. Misinformation that they implant, infiltrate different groups, try and get us working against each other, throwing out kind of weird stories out there that are just half truths and just to confuse us. And that's basically what their job is. And, everything's been compromised for decades now. Going clear back, to the 70s, you could say, even further back then. If you look at everything that's happened since 9/11, all the civil liberties that's been taken from us, it's just one thing after another. Just people need to wake up and quit thinking everything is a conspiracy theory or look at it in that way. Whenever we have all the proof around us, all you got to do is keep your eyes open. And you know what's going on, but we just keep allowing ourselves to become divided and labeling each other instead of united, and that's their worst nightmare, is us being united.
So it's funny you guys say that because Alex Jones was on with us last week, which was pretty cool. I've been listening to Alex on Rogan several times since he first started going there, and I told him I was like Alex, admittedly when I first listened to a lot of the stuff you said, I thought you were crazy, and then more and more stuff came out to be true across some of the bounds. I'm like, oh, this guy makes a lot more sense. And now we see these documents. So I wanted to interject. I want to end with a question, but I want to interject with the newest thing that we just posted. And we have a lot, and we're going to be posting at a higher velocity, a little quicker. Is that Epstein's criteria for a personal assistant was, quote, someone very young, looking pretty. So this came from Jane Doe 43, who Sarah Ransom said she was tasked with finding a personal assistant in South Africa for Mr. Epstein, for Jeffrey Epstein, who was very young, looking, and pretty. And the question I want to pose to the panel is, well, this is kind of like more stuff to kind of back up what's going on. But I wanted to pose to the panel. We hear a lot about the Mossad connection here, and we have a panel of folks who clearly are discussing the intelligence agencies stateside. I'd like to hear more about the Mossad connection from anyone who wants to jump in. Ian, I saw you unmuted. I want to see if you want to jump in on that one, and then we can pass it around the room because I want to learn more about that. And I think it's an important one that we might not get in these docs, but I think that a lot of you guys have a lot of information for your independent research. So Ian, go ahead.
I was actually going to sidetrack us on just other stuff about the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover being a piece of shit. So we should move to someone else.
No problem. Johnny, do you want to jump in, and then we'll go to Champagne?
I'm happy to talk about that. I know I get attacked.
Keep that in mind, though, Ian.
Yeah,
keep that in mind, though, for later.
indeed, I like it too. I get shouted a lot at by people who haven't heard my argument properly. They hear me say that he wasn't only Mossad, and they seem to think that means that I don't think he was Mossad. And it's like, it's just not true. He was clearly in bed with so many people, and this was everybody around him. That Mossad connection goes through everybody, so that it can be backed up really easily by the fact it goes through the Maxwell family, that it goes through Epstein's whole dealings. That it's the same with the Clintons. It's the same with all these different people. The Mossad are very clever. They try and get right in between things. I've explained that within the technology realm the other day. They do the same. They get in between. They don't create the main technology infrastructure at the top. They do all the links in between, so they can get. And it's part.
So Johnny, aside from the tech, talk to me about the influence that they could have, because I know the tech part. I know that Israel has a huge tech sector and a huge tech hub that branches out. It gets funding from all over the world, a lot from the U.S. because a lot of them go public on our stock exchange. But I want to know more about the influence that these connections could have had.
Well, go back to the rise of these people in the first place. This sort of like infrastructure of intelligence and how it changed. It was in the 60s and 70s. And really, a lot of the reason why we act in the way we do now is because there was a lot of Jewish groups on the ground who were pushing a certain direction to change the government, that kind of like to change things like the CIA to be kind of from anti-Zionist to be Zionist. And there is a lot of that around the rise of the Mossad, because there was just basically a capitulation at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s to allow in a lot of or to do a lot more multi-agency operations, multinational agency operations. Then we see, like I say, Operation Condor influenced that quite a lot, and then we see it a lot in the 80s and 90s. Mossad and America not only working together, they're working against each other. Mossad are doing their own operations on this side, and Mossad, everybody fears them. The things they do, and they can get rid of you in a way that is just, they don't seem to care about any accountability. The most intelligence agencies are scared of their own people holding them to account, and you feel that there's not enough holding Mossad to account in Israel, so there'll never be accountability for their actions. So they can get away with so much. They're so feared, and they influence people in all different sorts of ways, not only financially, but that fear itself.
So for anyone listening, real quick, for anyone listening, I'm not suicidal after asking that question. I just want to make that clear. I love life. Just want to put that out there in case something happens, God forbid. Just needed to put that. I've been saying that on many spaces since we started covering this. But
can I add
Jason, go.
That answer?
Jason, go ahead. Then we'll go to Ian and Trumpster.
Sure. If we can just go to like the historical nature of the Mossad and Israeli intelligence in some of these operations, let's talk about Iran-Contra and then the relationship to Bill Clinton. So again, the weapons that were actually bought and shipped down were bought by Israeli intelligence. Michael Harari was the connection there. Now, remember, when Vicky Ward talks about his intelligence connections, she mentions Khashoggi. So again, if Epstein is involved with arms deals, Khashoggi would be somebody to know during that time period. Get to Clinton, and it is so well known that Mena, Arkansas, and Bill Clinton are implicated in Iran-Contra. This was supposedly one of the landing strips where they were bringing the drugs back through. That you have, I mean, there are books written on this. You have allegations that Bill Clinton was showing up and getting suitcases of money on the spot. It was so well known that the movie American Made, which by the way, is highly fictionalized. I want to make that extremely clear, but was about Iran-Contra. Not only has the Clinton cameo where he rescues Barry Seal from prosecution or arrest from all these multi-agencies, but it was initially going to be called Mina. Now, Clinton's own brother, Roger Clinton, was picked up in an undercover sting, picking up loads of cocaine. So this stuff has been on the record. Then you look at Israeli intelligence and the media via Robert Maxwell. Now, he's working with Israeli intelligence. When that's outed by another member of the media, Seymour Hersh first writes about it. Maxwell contests this and sues Hersh. Now, the Mockingbird media went right along with that and had claimed that Hersh had fallen for hoax claims from people that were not reliable. Hersh countersues. And it's only after Maxwell's death that he actually wins, and the media has to put out retraction. So when you talk about the Mossad and their influence, well, the Mirror and Robert Maxwell were big time narrative pushers back in the day. I mean, fake news isn't a new thing. And then you look at Les Wexner, and Les Wexner, who again has now been exonerated criminally with his involvement with Epstein. I'd like to point out that he has his own foundation, the Lexner Foundation. They are very pro-Israeli. I think it's the Frank Luntz paper that you can read after the fall of Saddam, how to keep the United States military in the Middle East. That was directly put out there. So again, it is an international intelligence operation, but the Mossad, definitely has a large role in it.
I'll say real quick because in terms of Mossad and the intelligence connections, former Israeli officers such as Ari Ben Menche said that Epstein ran a honeypot and specifically for Mossad and was being recruited by Maxwell. You have other people as well, including how he got his money, was linked to Victoria's Secret owner Les Wexner. And of course, that money was, given. And also, he had, basically had a humongous house that he would operate out of too. He had Israeli ministers going and talking to him in, very long meetings and whatnot, such as Ehud Barak in the New York apartment. And of course, Barak also was introduced to Epstein by another former prime minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, who also gave a eulogy to Maxwell at a funeral. So there is a lot of coordination in between, high profile Israeli leaders, very big Zionist, donors and people of that magnitude. So it's clearly look at all of that's just a small portion of it, but there's a lot more to the whole Mossad's connection. But Mossad it's again a very powerful intelligence group. They have a lot of influence. And I'm sure that he was being used by Mossad and other intel agencies to their own, to push their own agenda, whatever that might be, to get material to blackmail people with, to do certain things or to serve as assets. Whatever the motives are, it's tough to tell because of how secretive and shadowy most of these intel groups are. And the connections we're kind of missing, I'm sure, are there, and it's just a matter of time before we find it. And if we don't, it's a lot of times because of how well hidden most of these operatives are, I guess.
Can I add a different angle or vector to this? Because your original question, Ryan, was how do the Mossad exert influence? And one of the undeniable aspects of intelligence is media and manipulation of information. And it's important to note that when we talk about Mossad, it's inevitably going to be crossing lines between talking about Jewish people, and not all Jewish people are Israeli or Zionist or complicit in any way. But when you are a powerful businessman and you're Jewish, Israel is very open, and we've seen it very clearly in the last month or so, that they're very open about pressuring Jewish people abroad to comply with Israelis' goals and to support Israeli goals. And if you're a business executive, for example, in a media company coming up, Israel is very open about their support of Jewish people abroad and their positions of power. And you can only imagine the position that a Jewish person in business is in when they have the option to receive a lot of backing and funding from a large network of powerful Jewish people around the world that will support their rise in, companies like Disney. And
He's just got out there. I would say,
Oh,
just to quickly
I got it.
mention that Ari Ben Menashe, I would have to say, once you're intelligence for life. And I can't believe everything you say.
That yeah,
you
exactly.
cut
And
off
so
for a second.
we can't ignore goals and furthering
Oh,
Mossad's goals, whether or not they're direct Mossad agents. It's all tied to Israel.
Ian, you keep cutting in and out. I'm not sure if it's just me or for anyone else.
I think Mossad getting in.
Open pressure.
Yeah, I think that they're playing with his Wi-Fi.
This does happen.
Ian, hold on, man. Your connection is bad. I'm gonna drop you and bring you back up, okay? Crazy timing on that one.
I don't think it's that crazy a timing, to be honest.
You think? Listen. Let's see. Hold on. Ian's back. I want him to try to finish what he's gonna say, and then we'll keep going. I'm very curious about the when I was asking about influence, like
It's
what
funny
types
how
of
that timing
influence could be
works out.
had aside from the business world. Like I'm curious about, like, were there ever any examples or anything in the stuff that you researched about, like direct politicians being brought into power because of these blackmail or stuff like that? Just out of curiosity.
I was not speaking directly about politicians. I was speaking about people in the media, people at the top of the
Mhm.
media, as the media is so critical
Absolutely.
to controlling Israeli narratives, which is deeply tied to Mossad operations. But if you want a quick drop that's a little like tangential here, is I could not help but notice the way that Hunter Biden, after all of his scandals dropped, married a really cute young Jewish woman, and within a week of meeting her, and got a matching tattoo with her and had a son with her, all within 1 week of meeting her. And there's articles in Israeli press about how proud Israel is of this new development.
A host, you're having connection issues. Just a heads up, host, if you can hear me. Guys, give me 1 second.
But I want to reiterate again that when we talk about Israeli connections around the world, inevitably it overlaps with Jewish connections around the world. And it is completely different to talk about Jewish people than Israeli people in Zionism. And it's not a discussion about the religion at all. It's a discussion about the political affiliations with the country.
Sure, gotcha. Appreciate the clarification there. All right, cool. Anyone else want to jump in on that question? Ian, you said you had a what's it called? You had a topic you wanted to jump into.
Do you mean when I said earlier that I was going to derail us about the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover?
Sure, go for it, man. The reason I say that is I'm looking for some stuff to post.
Yeah, I
We
got
have
you, man. I can rant on Hoover for forever.
Piece of shit.
And I know a couple of other people in this space that can also go with me. But it's important for the audience to remember, if you don't know, that the FBI was founded by a man named J. Edgar Hoover, who later he continued to run the FBI for like the first 40 or 50 years of its existence, which is an unprecedentedly long time for someone to hold a position of power like that. And he was never elected, he was selected. And J. Edgar Hoover was intimately involved in sexual blackmail operations in the earliest days of sexual blackmail operations being used as pressure and leverage in political narratives. And that, if you don't know about that, you